what does it say? It's gonna be gone. That was me. Okay.
Okay.
Just admitted you, Mr. Lopez.
Thanks, sir.
Mark, Mr. Schwartz, the same, you cannot hear anybody.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
Mark,
Should be, but
Mr.
we'll
Schwartz, the
check.
same, you cannot hear anybody.
So if you bring up.
Yeah.
This?
Bring up.
Yeah.
This? Oh, Sif?
Okay.
Oh, Sif? Once we get rolling, making sure so we don't.
Okay.
come over here. Open presentations. Making sure we don't-
Good to see you. How are you today?
So great. Everybody in this room needs to have a mic on. This.
Yeah. How are you today?
And it was hard to hear. We had to focus.
Everybody in this room needs to have a mic. Yes. We just need to get everything finished. Here, we need to get everybody's
Yeah.
volume, everybody's mic muted. We just need to get everything.
Can everybody that's not
Here, we need to
here,
get everybody's
Yeah.
volume, everybody's mic muted.
Ron, fixing us now.
We just need to get everything finished. Here, we need to get everybody's volume, everybody's mic
Ron,
muted.
this Ron, you can hear us.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. I'm just curious as to.
He says, it looks like everybody.
Mr. Schwartz, can you hear us?
He said,
Mr. Schwartz, can you hear us?
he said, it looks like all parties are muted. He said.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yeah.
can you hear us? Oh,
He
somebody-
said, it looks like
We
all
are,
parties.
because we have one central computer.
It looks like
We
all
are,
parties.
because we have one central computer.
Is that microphone?
That microphone is on.
We are.
And Mr. Schwartz says he can't hear us.
It's built in one of the-
That might
I think it's computer. And Mr. Schwartz says he can't hear us.
Is anybody else remote that can hear?
Ron, are you muted on your own computer? He can't hear us.
Feel from there, and if anyone were to take this-
Ron, are you Muted on
Oh,
your
I
own
see.
computer? He can't hear us.
Oh, that's why.
Ron, are you muted on your own computer? He can't hear us.
Oh, that's why.
Ron, are you muted on your own computer? He can't hear us.
Yeah, I think, yes, this is the reason for that.
Got it.
Beautiful. Okay.
But that's good.
Yep.
Okay, Ron's working on it. Do you think if he logged on, it comes back?
Yeah, it's certainly his computer.
I got it.
Okay. We should be good to go.
He may do that, so somebody may.
That's-
let it.
Okay, we'll be monitoring Mr. Schwartz.
Second.
No, they did, and they've been working on it, like, since they've had some of their the problems.
Should I get a?
He's gonna log off and log back in. Hopefully.
I love.
Yes. we should be good.
Is logging back on?
I'm not seeing you quite. Oh, yep, that's.
No, that's.
Mr. Schwartz, can you hear us? And Mr. Schwartz, you can stay unmuted.
Can we hear him?
Can you test, Mr. Schwartz?
I just shouted him. Is he on mute still?
He's not on mute.
He's also not saying.
He's not saying.
Audio, but maybe do cell phone and keep the video.
So I'm gonna, I know it's gonna. echo again.
Sure.
Ron, can you hear when we're off mute?
Who's got their phone?
No.
What if you take
Yeah,
those
just
headphones
the
off?
headphones off.
It's set up right.
I don't know.
Mr. Schwartz, can you hear us now?
That's me.
There.
Right.
Unmute.
I understand.
Oh, checking.
We're good on that.
Okay, what do we want? We're 7 minutes behind schedule. Has Matt called it?
No, and he's gonna be running a little bit late. What if we prop up? Sure, let me. We prop Ron up by phone.
Yep. You get another mic.
Sure.
Okay.
Good morning.
Morning. I think we're just gonna start with you on phone for the moment.
Can we start with pledging allegiance to the flag?
Well, yes,
we'll get
but-
there in a minute.
We haven't started the meeting yet. We just want to make sure you're there. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
All right, well, let's just go ahead and get started. Mr. Clausen, I believe, is going to be coming in to us a little late, but shortly. Okay. We're going to call the meeting to order. The Board of Education, first of all, the Board of Education maintains a website on lewispalmer.org through which members of the public can find live streaming information and meeting records, as well as presentations and resources, which will be reviewed and discussed during this meeting. Ms. Wood, would you take the roll call?
Mr. Norris,
Here.
Ms. Phillips,
Here.
Mr. Schwartz,
Here.
Ms. Upchurch.
Here. And Mr. Clausen again will be late. Let's do pledge of allegiance. Mr. Norris, if you could present pledge of allegiance.
Yes.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Our first item on our agenda is our town monument annexation. This is item P1. And we have with us several guests. We have Mr. Mike Foreman, our TMO manager, as well as some other distinguished guests. And I will let you guys I know you guys, but I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. And I think we're ready to kick off.
We've got our newest police chief, Patrick Regan. He's here straight from Scottsdale this weekend. Got council member Jim Romanello, and then back in the back, Mayor Pro Tem Steve King. And Dr. Summers. Oh, and Jeff.
And Jeff. Jeff. Bilger, with the plan.
Yeah, he's acting as our planning department right now because we have a new planning director starting in about 2 weeks. I think she's gonna be on. And she'll help us through this process. Dr. Summers, do you want me to take it from here or would you?
Well, no, I appreciate that, Mike. Let me just do a quick orientation to what we have in front of us, this being our first item on today's work session. So thank you to Town Monument officials and trustees for being with us this morning. We have had really over the past couple of years, some different types of potential exploratory, call them conversations around the possibility of annexation. And so what we wanted to do this morning, and Chris Coulter is going to set this up a little bit in terms of what exactly would be involved in an application for annexation. Specifically, we're talking about Palmer Ridge High School, Lewis Palmer Middle, and Lewis Palmer High School. So with that said, Chris, I'm going to let you kind of steer it from here. And then we have, again, our folks from Monument who are in a position to answer any questions that we may have.
Thank you, Casey. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see our friends from Town of Monument. Jeff, it's nice to finally meet you. Appreciate the emails. I've had one for years. Good to see the team. We're going to walk through. We're going to lean on Jeff on some of the things, especially related to the decision schematic, as well as some of the things in the checklist and the Town of Monument checklist related to those things related to the Town of Monument annexation requirements. Some of the things that let's see here.
Hey, Chris, do a slideshow, click on slideshow so that it's a full blown screen. Nope, don't hit.
Next to the picture. There you go.
There you go.
All right, look at that. Okay, that's what we're going to sort of walk through a couple of different items. You can see they're here in the table of contents. The Town of Monuments, they laid out really well for us. Very straightforward, especially as we get to our next steps as we retain a civil engineering firm to sort of move sort of a firm to sort of walk us through the different items related to the annexation checklist. The things that we will do when we retain a civil engineer, the things that we'll be asking for of that engineer as we have them engage the Town of Monument folks. We're going to walk through real quickly, schematically, Palmer Ridge, Lewis Palmer and Lewis Palmer High Schools. And then we really wanted to lean on the Town of Monument folks, Mike and his team, related to what are the benefits, what are the things that are changes, what are the things that are the drawbacks, and the advantages of annexation. And then next steps, how do we move into next steps? We want to talk about timing. We want to talk about the urgency that might be so that we might want to sort of make sure that is in line with the things that we are going to talk about and engage going forward. And we want to make sure that our partners with the Town of Monument are on board related to, what our timing might look like and what are sort of our urgency and those items might be going forward. Here are those 17 items. It's actually 2 pages of those items. So I've got it sort of laid out there. But one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about, I've got some schematics for our zoning. And you can see zoning is in that first item. It's got that arrow related to it. But zoning, we don't anticipate any changes associated with zoning, but it is an item right off the bat that we're going to have to sort of pay attention to. And those various different things related to zoning for schools, zoning for the things that we're looking for, as well as some of the items related to everything from snow removal, security access, and viability related to the sheriff's department and the things that are going on between the change between the county and now working with the Town of Monument. But these are the things that we will, when we retain a civil engineering firm, these are the things that we will start with in terms of those engagements working with the town and Jeff and his team. These are the things that we would sort of lean on them right off the bat and say, hey, this is the checklist. We'll start with number 1 and then we'll move forward. There are some things that we will have to engage the public upon. If you live within 500 feet of the boundary of the items associated with annexation, you will get a letter. There will be engagement after the application process is initiated. There will be things that come out from the Town of Monument related to engaging those neighbors that are adjacent our school sites.
I have a question, quick question.
Oh, yes.
You're talking about retaining a civil engineering firm.
Yes.
Would that be, it would be mutually retained or would D38?
No, D38 will remain,
Okay, thanks.
working collaboratively with the town folks. And we've done that many times, whether it's, a development plan process, working with the town and the planning folks, anything related to any type of changes, that would be something that would be normally engaged. And I've been to a number of meetings the Town of Monument has had related to that with firms that we are very.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on
Yes.
that. From a layman's standpoint, why do we need a civil engineer?
Well, they work on the documents that are sort of laid out here in this particular checklist. They are the firm that would actually put those documents together, related to get the necessary signatures, the necessary legal documents, because a lot of these documents are documents that a design firm would need to put together, working with the city, the town, and the various different other government authorities having jurisdiction related to what's going on, even utilities, and those types of things.
How does a civil engineer putting those documents together versus our own administration putting those documents together?
We just don't have those documents. We just don't have those in sort of an electronic format. And then how do we collaborate those things and how do we work across, like I said, utility organizations, the Town of Monument, and the various different organizations that are sort of they have their own functions and areas of responsibility that they would.
Chris, let me just stop you there, because Jeff, I think you had something that you wanted to.
Just wanted to add to the point of an engineering need to be a part of this process. One of the many documents that will be a part of the whole suite of documents that are created in this process, annexation plat. Annexation plat requires by itself a stamp and a seal from an engineer, so the certified engineer. So that alone, I mean, there's many things that they'll be stamping and sealing on, but that in particular one item alone is the reason why they need to be a part of that process. So they're actually surveying, putting out a needs and bounds, legal description based plat that lies down basically what the parcels are that are going to be annexed.
And why does the residences and businesses that are within 500 feet, why do they need to be notified? I agree that they should be, but I was curious.
Those are the ones. That's per town code.
But it
So
doesn't affect them, right?
So for public, maybe frame your question.
So if we're doing an annexation and we're doing a flagpole, I think is what it's called, annexation of our properties. The adjacent properties to our district properties are not, they're not affected by this at all, right?
So there's a couple different questions you have going on.
Okay.
The first question you're asking about the 500 feet per code. You have a public notice that has to be done through publishing, through posting, and through mailing. The posting is a visible sign on the site. So that's your most localized notice. The broadest noticing is a publishing. So you have an ad that's put into a paper, and that gives you the broadest reach of notice. The tertiary, the intermediary piece of that is mailing. And so the way our code is written, we have a 500-foot buffer that is cast out from the perimeter of each annexation parcel. And all of the parcels and land ownership that are within that 500-foot buffer get acknowledged that this is occurring, so that they are aware of it.
Sure.
To your point of how are they impacted?
Yeah.
So in a flagpole situation or scenario, you've got the first and most important thing you have to establish for annexation is a sixth of perimeter adjacency. Contiguity is the word that's used. And so that contiguity can be accomplished. So it's basically those boundaries that touch what's being asked to be annexed next to what is town boundary. And you can use a flagpole or the perimeter of a roadway, public roadway, to extend out that perimeter of the town's boundary to achieve that contiguity. You take in the full perimeter of that piece and the perimeter of the roadway that's being used as the flagpole, and you associate that with how much is touching down county or town boundary. And if it's what's more than 1/6 of that perimeter, then yes, it becomes eligible for annexation. What does that mean for the parties that live around that? They now become, if that gets annexed in, they now become, sharing a boundary line with the town, and makes them in a better position if they wanted to be annexed later due to contiguity that they have. So that answer your
I
question?
think the main point you're looking for is we would not annex them without them requesting to come in for
That's correct.
annexation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like we wouldn't annex the schools without you asking to come in for annexation.
That's my, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're driving up Woodmore to Lewis Palmer Middle School and you've got those houses within 500 feet. They're not annexed into the town of
We're not
Rockland.
going to annex them without them requesting to be annexed.
Okay, understood.
That gets to the whole process of annexation, which is where it starts, which is a petition. That petition has to come from the landowner requesting, may I please become annexed into your municipality?
Okay,
So that's who starts the whole process.
understood. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Here's an example that we're showing on the screen that was from an engineering firm related to the petition for annexation. And it talks a little bit about the number of acres that were involved in this particular annexation or petition, as well as the 500 feet requirement, things like that. So this is just, again, this is just an example of that first step associated with the town of Monument annexation process. We have sort of retained engineers to do this before, so it's nothing that's sort of out of the box thinking for these types of conditions. Again, Lewis Palmer School District, we are looking at, just as Casey had mentioned, Lewis Palmer High School, Palmer Ridge High School, and Lewis Palmer Middle School. Those are 3 locations that sort of now all our secondary programs within the school district. And then one of the things that we wanted to talk about, and maybe some of our guests here that are here today, we can talk about some of the benefits associated with the town of the town of Monument annexation. Everything from public safety to snow removal to traffic enforcement support, which we are in the midst of. There's a lot of changes, especially at Lewis Palmer Middle School right now related to traffic enforcement support, and we're looking for how we can lean on other entities, other organizations, as well as work with Dennis and his team as to how to share those services. Some of the folks that we have, even from our grounds department, are actually supporting what it is that we are doing because of the immediacy of what's going on, as well as some of the changes that we have related to, we're going to be parking buses on the north lot at Lewis Palmer. We're hoping to have that done by January, so that all of our buses are all located, instead of doing a lot of the sharing that we're doing with parents right now. We're sort of in a safety and under the guise of safety, we're hoping to move all of our buses to the north lot by January.
So Chris, let's pause there and spend a little bit of time on this topic, please.
Yeah, what's the, I don't know that we ever talked about cost. Is there a cost with the civil engine retention and civil engine?
Absolutely. And I don't have those costs quite yet. But absolutely, there will be there's a compensation aspect.
Bigger cost with town monument, or is that something that's
One of the things that the town does when it's another governmental entity, we have some fees that we typically charge for people that want to annex into the town. And so we're probably going to waive those fees for them.
Okay. But that would be something that going forward, we will have all those proposals for you. But do we want to lean on to have a discussion with our?
Well, I think there's a why to this, right? And the biggest why that I think we recognize is that there's an opportunity for a more focused and formalized presence, specifically with law enforcement. But it extends a little bit further than just the services that law enforcement from Monument Police Department can provide. And I know there's some different questions. Obviously, we've had a long-standing relationship with El Paso County Sheriff's Department. We have 2 of the best SROs. We have gone on record multiple times and talked about how those 2 individuals are individuals that we have really benefited from their presence in our schools. It should be noted that the actual memo of understanding or arrangement with El Paso County Sheriff's Department is intact for this entire school year, to the degree that there's a potential to enter into an MOU with Monument PD for the following school year. That decision has not been finalized as of yet. So nothing would threaten our current relationship, and there's just an opportunity that we're going to have to keep discussing because there's no guarantee that we get the 2 SROs that we currently have year over year. That is subject to essentially the sheriff's department decision on who to locate at our schools. We do have a pretty long-standing relationship where we've been able to benefit as long as we have, but where I'm really getting to is that relationship is not locked forever. That's not something that we would necessarily know who those 2 SROs are always going to be. So in the event that we're moving in this direction at some point down the road with Monument Police Department and with our new chief, we have an opportunity to broker that relationship and to really have a conversation about who makes the most sense to have as our school resource officers as we're moving forward. But I think that's kind of a big picture overview. And then Chief, anything else you'd like to add to that piece of that?
Absolutely. So as we talked about, you do have 2 excellent SROs there. I mean, it really is not about quality of the work you're getting
it's a matter of attrition. At some point in time, those people are gonna go. And if you're gonna need to pick a new person, we think maybe Monument would be a good selection, and the reason is proximity. So El Paso County is huge, right? And they staff people far and wide, but we get one officer north of Woodman. The other ones are SROs. So they do have a small network, but you get the 28 cops of Monument if you annex into the town. So if I put an SRO in these 3 schools, not only do you get the public safety, but now you get the traffic enforcement support, talking about the issues we just had at the middle school that we were made aware of. But since it's not in the town, I can't take people off of town matters to go have them do traffic in the county. Now, if county got there and something really bad was happening, we're going to go there. And I'll preface all of this by saying, if anything really bad happens, we're going anyway. The difference would be, we are going to be there day in and day out. We'll have a larger network. There's more backup. It's just a more robust approach to the school resource system than just putting a cop there and basically hoping they can handle it.
And I think some other things we've actually talked about in those types of conversations is the presence that Monument PD actually has in the whole community, and then really getting to know more of our students, more of our community at an earlier stage in that engagement. You want to comment a little bit more?
Yeah, so we actually started our school resource officer program last year, and the cornerstone of setting it up was that early interaction with our own population. So we have kids from Monument that are going to all kinds of D38 schools that aren't in the town. But I can have a local officer in there that's engaging with them, that may show up on a call for service with them later, may hear that we're going out to a certain house, and we already built a relationship. So I think, to your point, that's something we could bring too, is just a more holistic approach, or maybe a better network of information sharing with our own kids.
If you ask the citizens of Monument right now, where do the schools exist? They'd say in the town of Monument. Most citizens, they have their kids go to school and say they live in the town of Monument, that their kids go to a school that's located in the town of Monument. For us, that's not true. You know, for us, we can't provide public safety that we would like to provide to you based on proximity. You're right across the street from where our town boundaries are, but really, we're the second call for you. If you call El Paso County, they're going to go there, they're going to get there whenever they get there, and then they're going to call us for backup when they just determine that they need backup. And so for us, it's about the control of the situation. And so if we've got SROs there, we have traffic support there, and we have a network like the chief's talking about that really serves you better, but it also serves our entire community better. And that's what we're looking at doing, is look at not only at our school district, how we can serve you better, but also serve our entire community better.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. I think I recognize the continuity piece between the community and the school and vice versa. Question that comes to mind is, our school resource officers currently, as I understand, they've been there a while. They have created a lot of great relationships with the students and the staff. Do they have specific training as school resource officers? And would the replacements, for lack of a better term at the moment, would they have the same, if not better, training to be able to build those relationships? Because that's what our students are needing a lot of, is relationships with people.
So the training for school resource officers is national, and it's standardized.
Okay.
National Association of School Resource Officers.
Okay.
So our school resource officer has been to that training. The D38 guys have been to the same training. What we do above and beyond that is our breakout training that we do. Like, I think we've gone to D38 schools, and we've done different, I don't.
We did the mass casualty
I
training.
was trying to use the right word. So mass casualty event, that's what another thing we would bring, is just another step in the training. So we'd all have a standardized training. A lot of that is about building relationships, working with children, working with staff and all that. But then we kind of go a bit further with the more practical application of, if this happens, how do we respond? If this happens, how do we respond? And that involves bringing in the fire department. We brought in the hospitals last time. We just try to take it another step.
Sure.
We put the training together.
I think we would add that we don't necessarily just see our SROs as I mean, they're not technically our employees, but they really are an extension of our staff. And so we also embed them into a lot of the training that we provide on a regular basis, whether that's trauma-informed, relationship building, or obviously our standard response protocols. And there's the number of different items that we want to make sure, and it's kind of an ongoing vice versa. In that conversation, we do a lot of ongoing debriefing and work as well with our school administration. Rick Frampton's heavily involved in those conversations as well. So it's sort of job embedded and ongoing in everything that we do.
Yeah, and our commitment to you also is build. You know, I don't know what happens today. I've heard some rumors about when vacations and sick leave happen and stuff like that. But if we have SROs that are there, we have the commitment that if they go on vacation, they go on sick leave, we'll backfill them. So you won't ever have a vacancy there to where, you know, bell to bell, you'll have a commitment from the town of Monument that will have an employee.
And I'm assuming that this would extend to D38 events at the stadium and
Right.
all of that would be.
And I think we currently do that now. We have a lot of employees that do.
So I'm sure we all have a lot of questions and there's a lot of good, robust discussion, and I want to be mindful of time. So if we need to take extra time on this topic, because I've got a lot of questions personally. So if there's any other discussion or questions as we're moving along, Mr. Norris, do you have anything?
Well, it might be helpful to just keep leaning into those questions,
Right.
because to be honest with you, outside of figuring out exactly what our boundaries are, which there's slides that speak to that, but those aren't going to be the formal part of an application set. We've already touched on some of the benefits. Is there anything else that we have not formally submitted an application at this time. We are in the process of working toward that point. So I guess please keep sharing with us what else you want to know.
What about our elementary schools? What about Kilmer, Prairie Winds, Palmer Lake? Obviously, that's in the town of Palmer Lake,
So Chris, go to the slide that shows the whole community.
because we have our SROs do.
So here's the situation. Bear Creek is the only elementary school that is currently in the town of Monument. The three schools that we have proposed here are the only three that are eligible for this application process, because if you look at Kilmer, way too far out east, Palmer Lake sits in Palmer Lake. Lewis Palmer Elementary School, there is not a contiguous border, as I understand it. So that is not even eligible to be pursued as a parcel that could be annexed. Is that accurate?
That's true about annexation, but when we're talking about SROs,
Yes.
today, we have a relationship with Monument Academy, and we serve both of their schools today with SROs, and both of their schools lie outside of our town boundaries.
So is the question more about why not annexing or why not having an SRO relationship?
My question was, when it comes to SROs, are we going to be able to lean in on town of Monument on PD, or are we going to still be needing to lean into the sheriff's office?
So my best answer for that is, in the event that we were to switch to Monument PD as our formal school resource officer relationship, keep in mind, we only have 2 school resource officers right now, and they are both stationed at both of our high schools. To the degree that we would envision a ongoing full-time SRO at middle, that is something that we have not had a lot of conversation about. Right now, what happens is if there's a situation, then they typically respond. We would have the ability for Monument PD to respond in the event that Lewis Palmer Middle School is annexed. In terms of response time to an elementary school that is not annexed, we would still lean on both El Paso County, and my understanding would be we can have an MOU between Monument PD and El Paso County to have a joint partnership in terms of how those schools are served. But we're not necessarily talking about having full-time SROs.
No, I wasn't, that's not what I was getting at all.
I think I understand so my overall answer is it's up to you. If that's something that you want, that'd be something we bake into the deal here, but yeah, as far as adding those as schools that we could respond to, that would just be part of our discussion. It's not precluded by anything.
And to your point, when you talked about that holistic approach of getting to know the students, it starts at the elementary level.
Right.
And we have always in the past, as a Lewis Palmer Elementary School mom, before Dennis was ever employed here in D38, he was
Sure.
the SRO, and we'd see Dennis in the elementary schools all the time, making sure that even our elementary schools were familiar with who our SROs were and who our trusted law enforcement was. So,
We would definitely envision that.
and so that was my question, is simply, we have other schools in our district. And similar to how Monument Academy is not annexed, but does rely on you guys, and your law enforcement officers could be deputized as well.
They all are. Yep.
Yeah, so to that point, not necessarily the response time, but if there's a relationship or a reason to have law enforcement officer at our elementary schools, this was a question to you, Dr. Summers, would we envision that being with Town Monument, with the sheriff's office, or both?
If we are moving in that direction to have our full-time SRO coverage coming from Monument Police Department, that would absolutely be a function of how we would work with them. But if you're asking me, and I'm sorry to make it a big to do here, are we envisioning a full-time SRO at each of our elementaries?
No, that's not what I was getting at.
You want to make sure that there's a presence in all of our schools.
Yes, there's a relationship.
And that would come down to basically your expectations. When we sit down to talk about percentage of time here, percentage of time there, that's something we could accommodate. But we really rely on you to know the amount of time that you're expecting people to have. We're having officers there.
Our philosophy is the same as yours, Mr. Upchurch. We want to get there as early as possible. We want to get that child recognizing what a police officer is, form that relationship so that when they are in high school, they've already got that relationship, and it's a different relationship than they have today.
So the simple answer is yes.
Okay. And then with this annexation, would we be able to solve our situation where Woodmore Security decided not to partner with D38 anymore? Is that a service that by annexing, we would be able to have somebody there to help guide traffic?
Right, yes.
Okay, that was another question.
Yeah, and that's when we get back to the community, that day that occurred, our council got a lot of emails from some people and very concerned about it. And our response was not the response I wanted. You know, I wanted to say, hey, get out there and let's go take care of it. We had a conversation about that same day. And I think Dr. Summers was out there himself taking care of it the next morning. But we would have rather been able to have our police chief assign officers out there. And so by annexing, that would allow us to do that.
And
What else?
ultimately, this discussion is going to continue. I mean, today is about the land and
The introduction of
Yeah.
the locations, our engagement with the town of Monument, as well as what the next steps.
right.
Other questions?
I'm sure they'll come up as we continue on.
Well, I don't envision us going a whole lot further in a presentation mode other than just sharing with you what we've shared with you thus far. So
What are the?
I have a couple questions if possible, if you guys can hear me okay.
Yes, go for it, Mr. Schwartz.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. These are probably good morning, Mark.
it just froze.
You just froze.
Probably take yours, but yeah, I'll text him.
So when we're talking about logistics, what are the differences in costs? Between right now, we partner with El Paso County versus if we annex, what is the cost to us?
I just don't have that information right now, but at the same time, I think that's where we want to introduce this idea that that's where we're going.
Is the question around costs with a resource officer relationship or unique to just the annexation costs? Because those are two different things.
Well, both.
Okay, so the costs for a potential change in that partnership have yet to be finalized. We are currently spending approximately $120,000 for our two SROs, one that are located at each of the schools. I would envision that we would be no greater than that amount with the purchase of two SROs. We're going to keep it, it's still the same. That is a 50-50 split with the county. So they pay for 50% of the salaries, we pay for 50% of the salaries and benefits. So I know that's not a negotiation right here across the table, but that is our, within a little bit of flexibility that allows for increase in salaries year over year. That would be the rough estimate that I would continue to foresee, if that's what we're talking about, is the school resource officer component. Unique to the fees related to annexation, I believe Monument has already shared that they would be willing to more than likely waive those fees for us. And then to the degree that we would have to engage a civil engineer, which is something that we've not yet done, I don't know that that's going to be an exorbitant cost. That's it's just the filing of the paperwork that Chris had alluded to earlier.
Snow removal.
So I don't know, I don't believe, in terms of snow removal, how would that work, Mike, in terms
So
of?
we'll have to look at the area and what we have to flagpole to get to you. And so we'll present that to our council to see what those costs are.
Okay.
Because we just like you, until we get all the paperwork done and everything like that, we determine what we have to flagpole and what our benefit to the town is. Then we'll determine how much that snow removal would cost. Because Jeff, I think there's a couple of ways we can flagpole this. One would be Woodmore Drive, the other would be I-25, and then the road between I-25 and Woodall. Yeah. So we'll have to look at that.
So this is all really good information as the process is moving along. My last question would be, and I'll want to make sure my other fellow board members have an opportunity to ask any questions as well, is we talked about the benefits. What I'm trying to find out is, from my perspective, what are the pros and cons? We talked about the benefits. Is there any downfall to doing this? And A, why haven't we done it sooner if it's all great and good to go? And B, just making sure that we're doing our due diligence as we're moving forward, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. Is there anything else we're missing? What are the benefits to town and Monument? Is there anything that we're not, if you were to want us to ask a question, what would that question be?
So for the town of Monument, when we look at it, it's about, servicing our community the right way. When I look at this community, it's so bifurcated. We've got water and sanitation districts, probably 6 or 7 of those. We've got the school district that lies outside of the town of Monument. I'm not used to that as a town manager, not being able to provide police services to our entire community is a hiccup for us. I think, when you talk about why we haven't done it sooner, I would ask the same question. I've been here 5 years. Me and Dr. Summers have talked about this ever since we've been here. We've gone through, this is our second police chief we've talked to about this. We've talked to different boards about this. I would have loved to accomplish this previously. I think there's a relationship that you have with the county right now that is very successful for this school board and for the school district. Previously, I don't think it was as successful, and we're just trying to prepare for the future. And so for us, I think it's about supplying our community with the needs that our community expects and being able to supply the school district with their needs into the future. For the town of Monument, it's about getting the kids into our system, getting our police department working with the kids sooner, so that they have a better relationship with our local police department. Our local police department can get information from kids. What we learned in the past was we're solving crimes outside of the school or outside of where your school lies, inside our town. We're solving crimes there, but really we could have solved them quicker if we'd have been able to have that relationship with the kids inside the schools.
Yeah, I would just echo everything Mike said and add, in terms of potential drawbacks, we have not necessarily identified any. So I don't want that to sound wrong to say. I know typically you're always weighing out, hey, what are the pros? And I think in this case, what we have done is just delayed this I think mainly maybe for the only reason that we've been talking more about, which is we don't necessarily want to forego the strong connection that we have to our current SROs. But as we've already talked about really at length here, that is not necessarily a relationship that is something that it doesn't deny the greatness of both of the individuals that we have. It's just where does it make sense to have more of that ongoing, longer term, sustainable relationship over time? And the relationship with the town is one that we just envision strengthening through this process. So if there are other drawbacks, we're open to hearing them. We just have not necessarily identified those.
Not a drawback, but how does the town then reconcile the increased expense with annexation?
As far as cost of officers. So
Yes.
it's one thing we're talking about now is we're budgeting for additional officers in the future. Our plan is to add more officers. As you know, we increased the sales tax the last couple of years to help provide for more officers for our police department. And so some of that is already in our plan.
And like you said, we'd obviously recoup some costs from the district, we pay for the rest of it. We don't like to charge 100% because we're not there 100% of the time, right? So in the summertime, I get that cop back for the most part. So we do get some money back from the district, obviously, that some of it you're already spending now. But to your point earlier, actually, and to answer your question on a con is we don't have those relationships that are there right now. So that would be a con. That would be my cops coming in brand new and forging all those relationships. But I do think there's going to be a time anyway where those SROs are going to transition out and you're going to deal with the same thing anyway. Just be with a different agency.
But Mr. Coulter, between you and Mr. Coates, you don't see any gaps in security or continuity or fluidity of safety for the students and staff.
Well, one of the
This
things I can't speak for Dennis, but at the same time, I just know that our relationships, especially when we talk about snow removal and things of that nature, we already have these conversations. It's really a continuation and a formalization of an existing process. But we see it as it'll work either way. The county will still be involved. I mean, it's not like somebody's really, and sort of lose that relationship in that sense. But we will continue to sort of make sure that those relationships, but we will sort of improve this relationship with the town of Monument in terms of becoming a little bit more formal, a little bit more, at the top of the list.
And I think one thing that I've left out is we have that relationship today with Dennis Coates and with John Hudson. John Hudson's one of our former commanders, or I think he was with the town for almost 20 years. And so we have a great relationship with Dennis and John already. And so we work together on a lot of training and stuff like that. So forming that relationship and continuing with that relationship in the future probably is not as hard as everybody's making it out to be.
I think one of my number one priorities, and I'm sure everybody else's number one priority, is the safety and security of ultimately our students and the staff that are in our buildings with our students, and the security and safety of our buildings in general. So Matt and Ron, do you guys have any input or thoughts or questions? Still there?
No, I'm not some type of.
Okay, anyone else? Any final thoughts or things you want to share? Questions?
Yeah, maybe.
No, thank you.
With really low risk, but just something maybe moving forward. I don't believe this department is unionized.
They're not.
But
And our charter also discludes that we cannot have a police department that's unionized or any of our employees can form a union. So our charter discludes that.
okay,
Right.
so my concern there was just years down the road, any kind of strike activity that would pull police away from the schools. Okay, great.
So what I didn't add, and that thank you, kind of helped with the segue, is that we're not facing the staffing challenges that a lot of police departments are. We're down one officer right now. And I have about 12 people to choose from to fill that spot. So going forward, I already have candidates to fill the spots that we're talking about filling. To your point, there could be a time where we come back through what we just went through and we don't have any cops anymore. That would be a discussion on whether we continue with SRO services. But it would only be something like that, and we're nowhere close to doing that.
Okay.
And the reason why we want to have this discussion now is I have to have a discussion with our council about budget. And so if we're talking about 2024, we started in August of 2024. We've got to have that discussion with our council about what impact that's going to be on our budget.
And Mike, just to clarify, that would really be contingent upon us applying for annexation and then to be successfully annexed
Well, actually,
before we, or is that something that,
it really isn't. You would not have to annex into the town because like I said before, now we are providing services outside the town of Monument. Our council has approved that. They've approved for Monument Academy, not only at the one at Knollwood and 105, but we also provide at 105 and 83 at the high school. So they've approved that this year, a change in focus on that. And so I think annexation and SRO can be
two mutually exclusive?
mutually exclusive decisions for the board.
Okay.
And ultimately, this isn't, from what I understand, Dr. Summers, you explain this to me, if I get this wrong. When we apply for annexation, the town council votes on whether to accept the application.
Right.
But we as a board aren't, this doesn't fall under our purview to apply. That falls, like you said, that
It
falls.
does not require board action to submit the application for annexation. That's correct.
That's your decision.
That it would be an administrative decision, yes. Mr. Schwartz, I know we have you by phone here. I think we're close to wrapping up, but did you have something that you wanted to bring forward?
Thank you. I think everything's been covered except maybe one macro question I have for the town, which is there's been a lot of annexation activity, including this strategy for the town. Constituents understand this.
I don't know that I understood that question.
Can you ask that maybe Ron, and
Just wondering what they.
what's the bottom line that you're?
Yeah, there's been a lot of annexation in the last couple of years in the town. And I'm just curious what for our constituents, what's the macro strategy around doing so?
Okay, so every year, the town council has the opportunity to approve a 3-mile plan. And so recently they approved the 3-mile plan. The town of Monument cannot annex anything that doesn't want to come into the town of Monument. Just recently, we had an information session with another community that we felt like wanted to move into the town of Monument. We found out that they probably don't want to move into the town of Monument. And so it's always their decision. The town of Monument cannot go out and just start annexing pieces of land without the citizens of that community wanting to come into the town of Monument. And so I think our focus right now is take care of what's in the town of Monument. Let's make sure we're doing great in the town of Monument. And then we'll focus on what we're going to bring into the town in the future.
So Mr. Schwartz, you're also wanting to, if I understand, how do we ensure that we're being mindful in helping our community and our stakeholders understand what this is versus anything other as it applies to the town of Monument.
Right, and thank you. In addition, just to make sure that we're, as we go forward down this path, that we're enabling the town to grow elegantly versus in a knee-jerk reaction manner.
We appreciate that.
Anything else for the good of the order on this topic?
No, thank you.
Mr. Schwartz,
No, thank you.
Mr. Norris,
No, ma'am.
Ms. Phillips. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time.
Taking the
Guys.
time to come and meet with us, and we look forward to more engagement and discussion on this as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For the opportunity.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. We'll see you guys around the neighborhood.
Yeah. I will.
All right, so our next item is B2 land inventory review. Our Chief Business Officer, Brett Ridgway, and our Executive Director of Operations and Development, Chris Coulter, is going to be presenting a brief inventory of district land. And to refresh us board members, understand for any future conversations, we've done this, typically we've done this annually. So I think it's overdue and it's a good discussion that we are looking forward to.
Yeah, we thought that this was a good
Okay, here.
opportunity with to be connected with this further conversation. And so I'm just gonna have a small presentation uploaded in board docs that I will bring up and show you here. It is, you know, being just over a year, it was kind of an interesting observation how few of the schools and properties of the Dill School District are actually in the town. And so what we have here that I wanted to show you is just a listing of the properties themselves. We have 12 properties, 10 of them are actual, or 9 of them are, of course, are the school locations, and then the big red central location here, and then we have 2 parcels that we own, or 2 locations that own that are vacant land right now. So that makes up the 12 parcels, the 12 locations that are comprised of 22 parcels. I keep trying to get those interchanged and mixed up as best I can. That comprise the district operated land portfolio. So 12 locations comprised of 22 parcels. And then there are the monument academy locations, which are in just their single 2 parcels to come up with the total district portfolio there.
For the 2, you said 2 vacancies. Well, there's one on Hodgin, and are those 2 at Forest Lakes continuous?
They are next to each other, but there's a roadway in between them.
Okay.
Huh.
So they're not yeah. Let's look at that. Let me look at the map. The map, this map isn't real beautiful. This is me putting something together and taping it up on my wall and taking a picture of it. The way that I had this is the largest resolution I could do and still have the actual boundaries that define the individual parcels of land. So that's why I've done it that way. So let's just go down and speak to that question right now about the Forest Lakes area. So down here in the lower left, the south west corner of the district are the 2 Forest Lakes parcels. And so you can see we have one. Neither one of these parcels are things that I really love, in all honesty. One, the one on the right, the one furthest east, is very small. It's only 4 acres, and the grade or the on that land is not really good in terms of usefulness for us in the future. The one that the next of it is a decent size, but you can see the shape of it is very, very narrow. And really, for us to do future school development, the more square, boxy around the site is, the better. That's where we can make the most use of it. So those are those 2 pieces of land. We have them. They're not great, but we have them. On this map in general, then what I've done is highlight in pink here where the district parcels are. And so right here in the middle where we're at, we can see the big red, this what I call the central complex, but it is really one contiguous piece of land, one single parcel. And that's something we want to speak to in particular here in just a minute. And it is one of the then 2 parcels of land that are within the General Monument, the other being Bear Creek, which is down here on the screen right at the bottom right now.
Hey, Brett,
Yes.
how do these parcels relate to where our student population is and will likely be?
Well, how do these parcels relate to where our student population is and will likely be? You know, it's interesting that we have only one school that's west of I-25. And it's the one up in Palmer Lake. Everything else is on the east side of I-25. So for the exception of those students that are boundaried and attend Palmer Lake, everyone else is crossing the freeway every day going to school. That's to middle school and high school, of course, in particular, but also some elementary, especially going into Bear Creek. As our future development happens, most of that will be on the east side of I-25. There is some growth opportunity on the west side, but most of it will be happening on the east side.
Is there anything particularly negative with crossing a freeway?
Is there anything particularly negative from crossing the freeway? It really, I would say it just.
Cost of busing.
Yeah, just, you know, speculation, I would say, you know, it really reduces the walking opportunity, which means it increases transportation requirement opportunity, whether that transportation is borne by the district or borne by families. So those are the two kind of theoretical issues.
And that model would be for elementary only, right?
Can you repeat the question?
The model would be for elementary only. And based on this current design, yes.
Yeah. I mean, but you know, yeah, we have busing and transportation for all middle and high school students. Everyone that's west of I-25.
Right.
And that is whether they're using the school transportation services or their own.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So so this map is just for you to have as a resource if you like, and if there's things you want me to do more, better, different on this, I can certainly do that in the future. But our other vacant piece of land is way over here on the southeastern corner. I should say it's on the corner because our district, of course, goes much further east even than this. But there's there in Hodgett Road, just on Hodgett Road, is our other vacant piece of land. Now, there has been some conversation, some ideation from Challenger Homes about them developing a site fairly close to Lewis Palmer High School. And if part of that development could include a school site, but there's really nothing official in that regard at this point. That's all just been kind of conversation and thoughts and ideas from the Challenger perspective. So we can get an update from that, see whether they're going to continue down that path and what their timeline would be for that.
Can I ask a question to that?
Yeah.
So with all that dirt work that's going in right across Higbee from Lewis Palmer High School, that's all Challenger?
I don't know, is it directly south?
Yes, yeah.
So the Challenger piece that I'm referring to is actually kind of catty corner to Lewis Palmer High School. Not this section that's directly south.
So that section that's being worked on, did we opt for cash in lieu on that?
A long time ago,
Okay.
yes.
Because that would have been a wise place to put it, I would have thought.
Well, it all comes down to the calculations and how much land would be owed. So I don't think the calculation was coming up to a feasible land
And that's,
parcel size.
is that county or is that town of Monterey?
In this case, that is town.
So our cash in lieu of per, that's, so the cash in lieu of is per rooftop, or is it just one lump sum and then the impact fee is per rooftop? Is it two separate things?
The calculation is the rooftop calculation determines the student generation, and the student generation determines the amount of land that would be required. And then is the decision of, is that a useful size of land, or do you go with the cash in lieu rate?
Right,
On that size of land. The cash in lieu rate is about the size of the land, it's not about the rooftop.
okay. Fair enough. My reason where I'm going with the question is, when that decision was made a long time ago, if that's in the town of Monument, does those impact fees, that cash in lieu of, is it based on what was agreed? What was it then or now?
believe for any new residence that is going up within the town of Monument, it would be based on the new revised rate
Okay,
and schedule that was approved 2 years ago.
thank you.
Unless there was some grandfathering for some reason that we're not aware of, but I'm not expected to be on currently.
Okay,
And that would apply to increased annexation as well.
Yes.
Yes,
would require what?
that would require, I think, Ron, I think the area that we're talking about is already annexed in the monument.
Yes, but my point is, as annexation continues,
Yes,
it's enhanced revenue on an in lieu of land gifting basis.
correct.
Yes, if they are annexed, if developable land became annexed and was then developed, that would be a much better scenario for the district than if it were to be developed county land.
Right, exactly.
But we don't have any, I mean, that's up to from what I understand. That's not up to the town, that's up to if. Let's say if Woodmore South wanted to annex, they would have to decide that themselves. So that's not something we can count on.
Right, but there's a trend of annexation happening clearly, right?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that. What did you say?
There's a trend of annexation happening in our region over the last couple of years.
So again, if that annexation were to include the, land that would be developed. that-
Exactly right. That's exactly my point.
So, what I'd like to really spend some time on, going to the next slide is this parcel here, this center complex. As I like to call it, because it's a little bit more than Big Red. So this is it where we're sitting up here now, really in this northwest corner of the facility, but going all the way down to transportation and to the two ball fields down the opposite corner. This is all one single piece of land. And so we have to look at all land, of course, as assets of the district, and are we utilizing and leveraging our assets to the greatest extent possible? And I think this picture kind of begs the question about all of this space, especially space that's fronting on Beacon Lake Road, where a lot of this is just kind of sitting fallow, really, for the moment. What there's something that we could do or should do with that. One of the limitations we have towards any of those conversations right now is the fact that it's all just one big single parcel. So some ideas that we've talked about is on a path to maybe doing something with is maybe to subdivide this parcel in a way where we could use then start to identify different pieces of it that could be used for different purposes and or marketed for different purposes that may be beyond the school district, but we give us a way to receive some value for that land if it's never, in fact, it's never really going to be used for instance, for a school building. This whole parcel right now is 24 acres all in. And so you could say, if we were to take this lower portion, which is about 16 acres, that would only be big enough for an elementary school. It wouldn't be big enough for a middle school, let alone a high school, according to our current guidelines. And so this really just begs the question of where should we go forward with this parcel, and should we pursue something that could provide an opportunity to generate funds that we may be able to reapply in a different place or for a different purpose. These are all capital assets. So if we were to do something, we'd like to figure out another capital asset to pursue with this. And so this is kind of one of the points of conversation we want to bring up today is just any thoughts, ideas, concerns about us kind of exploring this further and looking at subdividing this big single parcel and looking at what our future strategies might be with it.
Is it worth distinguishing between, I'm kind of looking at 6 different blocks.
Yeah.
We'll give them I'm just ideating out loud. Is it worth distinguishing between that middle block where the old Grits Best School is, which there's been sort of continuous but intermittent conversation and work around that the last 10 years, versus the 2 blocks on the lower right, that aren't, I mean, I know the buses pass through there, but I don't know how much the bus barn is actually using that space. But to me, they're slightly different conversations, if you will. And how do we go about exploring options for those when they are, it's not a one contiguous piece of.
I totally agree. And just, let me clarify too, that these grade lines that are superimposed on here, these are just theoretical, just like extending the roadways that
Yeah, no,
exist inside.
they're helpful though.
And so these lines may not be the most sensible, especially because they go through buildings, as you see in more than one occasion. So where we actually draw the subdividing lines will probably be somewhat different from this. But I do think if we were to pursue subdividing this, it could allow us to then have very specific conversations about specific pieces of it. Right now, we kind of are locked into a conversation about the whole thing because it's all one whole big piece. And
Well,
so,
historically, I think it's been a conversation about the whole piece or a conversation about the old Grace Best building.
right,
And I think there's certainly different ways to consider it. This is actually a helpful visual representation, even with, I understand that the grid markings aren't
right.
specific, but yeah, I think it's what pops out in the lower right is, a section of land with the ball fields there, but then there's a lot of space there, and I think it's worth having more discussion about. It's just an asset that the district has that could be better utilized.
Yeah, and so I think, similar to what we've been talking about with annexation, some of this is administrative in nature, but it's also, I think, a good opportunity to just have transparent conversation and discussion and make sure that we're all on the same page before we as an administration would head down any particular path. So, heading down a path of subdividing this one big parcel is something that we could do, but we really want to do it. We say, hey, that makes good sense, and as one whole team, that's a good path for us to take.
Are you looking for us to brainstorm what comes to the top of our mind to opening up a can of worms?
No. No, to keep the can of worms.
Not yet.
Can. No, really, we're just looking for any strong hesitations to us pursuing kind of a subdividing strategy. And for us to do this, we would actually start talking to some developers and saying, okay, if we were to create a couple of parcels of land that could be developable, meaning they could be sold and to someone to do something with, i.e. giving us the opportunity to recover value for that piece of land, and what is the best kind of shape or size or location for that. So it would be some conversation with a couple of developers, some commercial real estate folks to say what would be the best path in terms of dividing this up so that it would provide the most value to us as a school district going forward.
So I think the board as a whole, the last 2-3 years has worked toward finding efficiencies where we can, and I think this is just another chapter or piece of that. Using the land assets that we have to the best of our ability. I think it's a worthy move forward to explore that first.
I concur on exploring it, but I also think in my mind, what popped into my mind in questions is you just pointed out how our land out on Forest Lakes isn't the best land. So is there a benefit? What goes through my mind, what I would love to have answers to is there a benefit to liquidating that land down there? And is this land here suitable for an future elementary school site? And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Is it suitable for selling it and liquidating this middle site to be able to have enough money generated to put Grace Best to rest, so to speak? I know you don't like that term, but I'm just saying so that we can finally address that. There's benefit to utilizing what capital we have to make our buildings and our educational space more efficient. Is there benefit to having programming there? Is there a benefit to selling it off and liquidating it? There's all kinds of questions that go through my mind.
Let me speak to one part there. I think we talked about the Forest Lakes land. I need to get more information on that dedication, where it was sourced and how long it's been, because if a school district is to determine that land previously dedicated and stepped in is not useful. The first thing that they have to do is to say is that within the time window, you use a 20-year time window post dedication, that developer has the right to reclaim it. And it's reclaiming it just at the fee in lieu of land rate. So assuming that we might be still within that 20-year window on that Forest Lakes, we wouldn't be able to just market that publicly, is what I'm saying. We might have to go take it back to the developer, and they would only be like, required to give us fee in lieu of land rate at that county rate. So,
but to Tiffany's point, we could get an overview of all the land, vacant land in the district.
Yeah.
With options.
Yeah.
To include this.
Yes.
To include this.
And maybe that's a more,
Yeah.
big picture approach to do that.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to steer a direction. I was just thinking out loud.
If I can try to wrap it up as a little bit of a summary statement. The intent at this point would be to continue to pursue what available or possible options exist within what we have available to us. And you're open to us putting some different thoughts behind that together, not necessarily pursuing any one specific course of action at this time. I think the other thing that we would envision with that is some type of well, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that happens with that. And then obviously there's a point where community engagement becomes really important. So, to be fair to everybody in that regard, more definition perhaps in terms of what is it and what could potentially live there, and understanding the bigger needs, and then engaging with the community in some way, shape, or form to help guide potential future decisions that the board has in front of them. Knowing that nothing is so urgent that we have to take immediate action, but we're also not wanting to keep kicking a can or not doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah, there's great opportunity to learn where can we generate more revenue to be able to address our capital needs with that capital revenue. There's also forward thinking what we talked about just at the staff pep rally on Friday of thinking 15 years ahead. We don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face either. So we want to make sure that we're being mindful of what the future of this district might look like, and making sure that we're making good use of all of the assets we have, and making sure that we don't sell something that could be used, that's needed 15 years down the road.
We appreciate you making the connection to the future oriented thought process as well.
Yeah, great.
Anybody else?
I concur. I think it's a great opportunity to think outside of the box and make use of our assets wisely. And if could add that the board would get the first right of refusal for any land sales, that'd be great too. I'm kidding.
Noted.
Yeah.
Anyone else before we move on?
Yeah, this is Mr. Schwartz. Both from a treasurer standpoint and a board member standpoint, think this is not only the right thing to do, but it's long overdue that we engage in this. And Ms. Upchurch's comments about maintaining the agility for future needs are really spot on. So that we ought to be able to do both. Right? Asset utilization is important. And I think it's a wonderful growth opportunity for the district and the board as a team to make sure we're really maximizing the assets that we have. And so maintaining the agility for adds, moves, and changes as our society and our population evolves. And that also goes to academic and non-academic skills that we're developing within our students and pedagogical methods. But it does start here.
Well said. Anyone else?
It's almost a good segue,
Yep.
but we have another item.
All right, so let's move on then to our next item, proposition HH overview. Mr. Schwartz, I believe you and Mr. Ridgway were going to lead us in this dialogue.
Yes, and I'll defer to Mr. Ridgway, who has both the knowledge and the intellect to cover it, and I'll chime in where needed.
Sorry.
Is there volume for Mr. Schwartz?
Thank you, Wes.
Mr. Volume, Mr. Volume.
Mr. Volume.
Is there volume?
Great, Mr. Volume.
Mr. Volume's on vacation.
Yeah. On inboard docs, you see that I put in a number of different documents that are all just publicly available. You search, you can find these all this information about Proposition HH. I put in some pro and some con, some of the legislative information. Ballotpedia is something that I always think is really a really good useful tool. So I put in there. So I really am not expecting or wanting us to do this, go through all of these today, because that would take way too long. I think the one document I would bring up is, since it has a great title called One Pager, is this version here from the Common Sense Institute about Proposition HH. And one of the things that I think would be important to highlight is where would the funding go? So again, background here is that Proposition HH would seek to lower, it would create some greater divisions in property tax categories, lower assessment rates. In exchange,
Mr. Ridgway, which, I'm sorry, I'm looking at all the documents, but
there's one that called said one pager.
I see.
Hey, Brett,
Yeah,
while we're at a mini break or stoppage here, could you take a half a step back and explain why the legislature put HH in front of us in the first place, so that we can make sure we espouse that?
so why did the legislature, why did
So
the legislature-
because we want our constituents to really understand how we got here in the first place.
So this is a referred ballot measure from the legislature, so it did not take the path of getting signatures from citizenry and that approach. It was referred from the legislature really at the behest of the governor. And assuming the best, I would say that this was being pursued as a way to respond to what was believed to be and it was going to be a sharp increase in property taxes for this evaluation cycle, based on the growth in property values that we have seen for the last couple of years. And so responding to that coming property tax increase with an offer to reduce that burden in exchange for creating opportunity elsewhere in the state by changing tabor limits and trying to basically take one piece of revenue and reducing it slightly in property taxes, and having another piece of revenue and increasing it at the state level. So it was a referred measure from the legislature. It is very partisan oriented. It happened right at the very end of the legislative session, which is not often a good way to put something forward, but that's kind of how it got to this point.
Thank you.
Sure. No, it does intend to provide extra funding. And this section of where the funding goes, where does the funding go is what I wanted to highlight, because education is prominently mentioned in this. And that seems to happen a lot with a lot of measures recently, where there is maybe one intention and in using education as a way to make it palatable has been kind of a game plan strategy for the last 20 years. And I would say that in education, we are kind of getting tired of that strategy. If you think about things going back to recreational marijuana, and because then the voters think that this will fix education funding, which it doesn't. It didn't, and this neither with this one. So using education as a emotional tie to try and get what is really about another kind of idea passed is something that I certainly have some hesitation for, and really much of the education industry has some great hesitation for it as well. In terms of the information that is provided in board docs, again, there's a whole bunch, and a lot of it also, including the media coverage, I think is an easy and interesting read that gives coverage from the Denver Post and the Gazette and various places around the state. There's a lot of hesitation being expressed in the media coverage, both in their op-eds and such, for the way this is being presented. There's some concern about the single subject aspect to this, although it's being allowed to proceed as written, without really any strong review of the single subject law, which is an interesting take by the courts. So again, anyway, I wanted to put all this information out there. I think that it may be better just to talk about, have some questions and see where you'd like me to go there.
May I make a couple comments / questions at this juncture?
Yes, sir.
Of course.
Thank you. And I've attempted as treasurer really versus a board member or a citizen, I've attempted to look into this as well. And there are lots of facts and there are lots of opinions out there, but it impacts our constituents greatly because about 80% of our constituents, according to statistics at the state level, are property owners. Their property taxes have gone up significantly. In the research I've done, it appears that 100% of the property tax dollars go to property owners, local county, and school district in which that property is located. And so this intends to lessen the burden of the significant increase that the citizens and the owners are experiencing based on the property tax future bills that everybody should have received earlier this year. Having said all that, it begets a couple of questions. And Mr. Ridgway, I'm going to attempt to ask you these. If you don't know them, certainly valid that you don't know, but to the extent you do, would be very valuable for our constituents and I think for the board. Is there any impact to the funding of District 38 or any school district based on HH passing or not passing?
So the biggest impact to HH for school districts would be that reduction of assessment rate, which would reduce the assessed value that could be levied against by a taxing entity like a school district. When it comes to District 38, because our mill levy override is a fixed dollar override, and because our bond levy is tied to bond redemptions, it simply would change the levy rates, and it wouldn't really change any of the total dollars coming to the school district, right? So if the assessed value were to be lower, if HH passes, that means that the levy rate would go up a little bit to compensate for it. So it really wouldn't be a change in the result for the school district. The fixed dollar override, which is $4 million fixed dollar override, would still be $4 million. It would just be a different rate. Same with the bond redemptions. We have those bond payments are scheduled, so we know exactly what we need to collect in order to make those payments. If the assessed value is lower because of a lower assessment rate from HH, that means the levy rate would just be up a little bit to result in the same thing. And so that's the discretionary funding piece of our levy. The regular education funding piece would change, but as part of the School Finance Act, it would change the mix of that. Right now, of course, we have the School Finance Act has pieces that come from local property taxes. It has the specific ownership layer, and then it has the state share. If that assessment rate, if HH were to pass and that assessment rate goes down, which means the assessed value goes down, which means the amounts collected for School Finance Act would go down, then the state share would in turn go up to backfill that. I think one of the things that the proponents would say is that if this passes, that state share component would go up, and not only to backfill, but also go up a little bit more. That's again where they're trying to use education as a lever in this to say, here's a path towards improving education funding.
So if I understand it, they're saying that they could use that to increase the state share of the per pupil revenue. But there's no guardrail that rails to say that they couldn't just make it in the terms, in terms of grants or unfunded mandates.
Well, no, there's no guardrails for that. There's also, now that we have the existence of the budget stabilization factor, to me, all bets are off, really, because they, even if there were guardrails that said this had to all go into education and had to all go into the general fund, the budget stabilization factor could just increase instead. Right, so the idea that this would improve education funding is really somewhat hollow, because there's still that reality, that other lever that could be played by the state at some other point for some other priority.
Mr. Ridgway,
Yes,
first of all, thank you. It's very complicated as we are learning quickly, but one of the important things I think for the team and our constituents and our customers to really understand here is we as taxpayers pay a portion of the operating revenue on a per pupil basis, and the state makes it up. Right, and that's the Education Finance Act that Mr. Ridgway was referring to. This year, we have the fortune to have a nice round, easy number to work with. It's about 10,000 per head. In this particular model, because of our forget about HH just for a quick moment, everybody's property taxes went up significantly. So therefore, the county portion or the local taxpayers portion, that 10,000 goes up. And so now the question is, what does the state do with the money it didn't have to put in 2024 versus what they had to put in 2023? Does everybody understand this conclusion before I ask Mr. Ridgway, because he has an answer?
Yeah.
Okay. So essentially, we are paying more of that 10,000, right?
yes, we are, and so let me show you one thing that I think interestingly demonstrates that this is just a piece of spreadsheet with lots of numbers. But what I wanted to highlight here is this is it's a total school finance act. Total for all the district, all the state this year is $9.1 billion, up from last year's $8.4 billion, which means it's 665 million higher. That was generated by a $636 million increase in the local share. So this increase that we experienced from 22-23 to 23-24, which has been great, and gotten us to this $10,000 per student level, is 96% a result of the increased property values going through the current tax structure, and being put into the school finance act. The state increase side was only $22 million, a 3% increase on their side of the equation. So there was a lot of patting on the back in the legislature this year for school finance act, school finance being funded so much better, but it really was about property taxes providing the bulk of that. So to your point, I think Mr. Schwartz, is the state revenues went up. Where else did they invest that money? And there's any number of things, but really it comes down to healthcare being the one that has been taking the lion's share of increases for the better part of 10 to 15 years now.
Okay, so first of all, thank you. Bottom line, I believe in what we heard is local property tax payers are funding the most of the increase in PPOR. Is that correct?
Most of the increase, not most of the total.
Right, most of the increase.
Yes.
So that's thing one that we need to make sure that we're honest and forthright with our constituents about. Secondly, at least that dough is going back to our kids, who are our community and our country's future. So there is some good in that. But thirdly, the real challenge that Mr. Ridgway referred to that would take a thesis paper to clearly understand is when there were federal changes to the Medicaid acts, it put the burden of that expense back on the states. And what he's referring to is it is a very large line item now in the state budget that has become, am I correct, Mr. Ridgway, the largest single expense? And that is around Medicaid healthcare.
Yep, universal healthcare.
Yes.
Right. And that change, just like we wondered where our increased property taxes, what the state was going to do with that money, it is exactly the same to wonder what the federal government has done with the money they're not spending, that the states are now spending on localized universal health care. It's a much bigger question, right? But to start to understand that, then we can start to understand why sometimes there's an ask at the local level. But what Mr. Ridgway is telling us is there's a lot of dough out there that could be used. It's just a function of working with our state legislatures and electing the right legislatures to make sure we get access to it. Is that correct?
There's that. As I would also say, because I've said it over and over again, that education is best funded with local support. And so this path, which would decrease the amount of local support, I think takes us further away from that ideal rather than towards that, but making sure that local control is supported and earned with local investment, and that those funds are collected here and used directly here rather than going through a state channel and a state formula to try and get it to come back here in a way that this community would rather see it.
To give to before we segue to the next one, we just finished our Colorado Association of School Boards Legislative and Resolutions Review Committee, and I think maybe this is a good time to report on good news for T38. As you all recall, we submitted 3 resolutions that will be voted on by the delegation, the state delegation of school boards, and that will drive the direction of CASB in their engagement in the legislative process coming up in the 2024 session. Of our 3, our resolution demanding that Polis make good on his promise to buy down and eliminate the budget stabilization factor. That was reviewed and was given a favorable rating by the committee, and then went the next step to a favorable review of being put on consent agenda for that particular one. So everybody unanimously agreed that we need to hold their feet to the fire. That was a promise that was made, was to get rid of the budget stabilization factor. Something we did in a wording of ours that is unique is our wording says to eliminate the budget stabilization factor, because the reality is, to what Mr. Ridgway was saying, there's nothing stopping the legislature from if they buy down the budget stabilization factor, to create another one to make up for their shortfalls. So that was why that one was worded very well, and we got a lot of positive feedback on that. A lot of kudos. Our one on local control of our budget and our monies, and we had to have a bit of a robust discussion about that. When we see monies coming at us as a district, we're seeing a lot of unfunded mandates, a lot of grants that we either can't qualify for because we are a affluent community, or we don't have the funds to match. That one was put forward with a favorable rating. Didn't get the consent, but it got a favorable rating. Our one on local control of curriculum, there was some robust discussion on that one, and they decided to put that one not as a favorable and not on consent, but just it'll still, of course, we'll vote on it, but as a delegation, but to really engage in that discussion of what does that look like. But to your point, this ties directly into what you're saying on there in our community. I've heard the buzzwords that my property taxes went up 50%, so T38 must have 50% more revenue. And that's not how it works. That's less money that the state is backfilling. But when Gallagher was first initiated, it was 50% share of D38 or any school district and 50% share of the state ideally. And so as Gallagher has chipped away from that, when we've gone from 21% residential taxes down to, what are we at 6.9?
6.7.
6.7. That's more money that the state is chipping into. And now with the increase, we're seeing the state chipping into less. Just chipping in less than they did before and more of it being local controlled. But by the same token, to your point, most of the state's obligation is going to healthcare, and that's where we're seeing that hit to education at the state level too. But we are still continuing to push and plug and fight back and work with, in collaboration with our legislature and our lawmakers and our lobbyists to, it's an issue throughout the state of Colorado. But anything, yeah. Anybody else want to add? Got me on my soapbox, sorry.
I guess if it's okay, I'd like to attempt to summarize HH because that's really how this began. Right. HH is a property tax reducing bill. Conversely, if it passes, it will increase the amount of money the state will keep before it begins returning taxpayer funds back to the taxpayers if there's excess revenue, which we've had that situation in the past few years, and the economists predict that it should continue in the near future at least. If one is a renter, it looks good on paper, and it's a gamble versus if their Tabor refund is going to come or not. If one is an owner, it is a simple equation over time. If they think their Tabor refund is going to be better than their property tax reduction. There is a risk, however, and the risk is if HH passes and state revenues go down, then there's also a shortfall. I just want to lay out those things. The community can certainly make the decisions that they think are best for them and their value systems, but those are simple facts that are behind this proposition. Mr. Ridgway, did I miss anything?
No, I think I appreciate that. It is a complicated item. And again, if you assume the best that this was started to try and help people with property tax increases. I did receive our report from the county assessor, by the way, that showed that land within the 38 the assessment went up by 37% for this year. So yes, that is a large increase. That also means then that the mill levy override rate will go down quite a bit. It means that the bond redemption levy will go down quite a bit since those are both fixed dollar amounts. So there are districts that have fixed rate overrides, and so it's a different scenario for them. But when you're operating for fixed dollars, it is some protection in that regard. There is a website. I think it's called my. See, I'm looking for it here real quick. You can do on a specific your own individual property. Go to mypropertytaxco.com. You can actually do a calculation for your property as a property owner to say how would this HH affect you with both the assumptions it makes in terms of changing assessment rates, and then what does it do to Tabor refund opportunities down the road. So if people want to see how their specific property would be affected, that would be an opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for that's a good synopsis and a good scenario. Appreciate, and I appreciate you bringing it up too. I think a lot of people ask questions, and there's a lot of good resources here too. So I would encourage anybody that has more questions to jump online and just go through those resources and look at that. Let's go ahead and get moving along. Thank you guys. Thank you, gentlemen. Jess McAllister is with us, and she and Amber Wetstein are going to talk to us about our CTE programs and our not just our secondary programs and our CTE programs. So, and I am looking forward to this discussion. Everybody doing all right? Keep plugging along. Yes. All right, let's go.
So let me pull up my screen real quickly. I just want to say thank you so much for, not. I am showing my screen. So, thank you so much for having me today. Again, Jess McAllister, Secondary Programs Coordinator. And when I'm in other educational settings with other districts or my personal life, when I say Secondary Programs Coordinator, people look at me a little quizzical. And I think that's because the programs that I operate and that are associated with the secondary programs in our school district really serve students kind of outside of the traditional educational setting. So either on a full-time basis or sometimes on a part-time basis. And these are either because of an expressed demand or a desire for students to experience something a little bit different. So I'm excited to share with you a little bit about them today. As I jump in, my goals for the day are just to review the current state of what's happening with our Lewis Palmer School District secondary program options, address any lingering questions or curiosities that exist, and then also consider any future aspirations. So Casey just came around and he distributed a note catcher online. I can pull up and show you a little bit of what it looks like. So if you're just viewing online, the note catcher looks like it does on your screen now. So in the columns, we have acknowledgements and celebrations, lingering questions, and future aspirations. And then along the rows, secondary online program, college credit opportunities, career technical education, and other. So I know that this was not available online, but if you want to just take notes, because I believe the desire is for me to get through these slides and then for us to have a conversation towards the end. So
Can I just echo that real quick?
Yeah.
Because I know in the past, and it's hard because we want to jump right in, but we felt like if we did that, we may risk not getting through everything. So this was our attempt. We're going to give it a shot and get you guys' feedback on using something like this for the purpose of not just the information that we're providing, but then really how we can incorporate feedback into those forward next steps. So Jess is well prepared to do this in a very organized and coherent way. So we're excited to have her take us down this road.
Okay, so if you were here in 2021, you remember that I had presented this graphical image that is really meant to portray a student's journey through our operated high schools. And so this was really just trying to call out an illustration that students can and do in a lot of cases experience lots of different programming options as they take their journey from 9th grade through graduation. So in the lower right hand corner, you will see that there is a key and each program that we're talking about has a color associated with it. So just really quickly, and dark blue is advanced placement. And this is a program that is created and operated by the College Board. And it offers college level curriculum and exams to students while they're still in high school. American colleges and universities may grant placement and course credit to students depending on how they perform on the end of semester exam. And so students proceed through the curriculum with trained and qualified teachers, and then they take a test in May. The next one is Career Start, and we will dive deeper into these as the presentation goes on further. And that's in light blue. This is really an opportunity for students who are inspired to pursue career opportunities as soon as high school. And so our students in Career Start actually are transported each and every day down to a location in Colorado Springs, either at the Pikes Peak State College campuses or through something called International Salon and Spa Academy. And they spend the duration of their day in that location and they learn whatever programming option they selected. There are about 18 programs that they can select. And again, we'll talk about those in just a moment. In purple on the screen is concurrent enrollment. These are classes that qualified students in high school can take that are usually aligned with guaranteed transfer opportunities so that they can transfer into an institution of higher education once they're finished. These are available to students on the college campuses, but also through a program that we offer here where we actually offer some of them on our campuses that are the most popular for students to take through something called Campus Pathways. These classes are taught by a college instructor and they're led through the college syllabus. So then we have orange. We have two
acronyms. This won't be the first acronyms that we see today, and I will try to be really specific about what they stand for. But CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. And these are classes that blend core academic content, post-secondary workforce readiness, and then also technical skills and a coordinated approach for students to really dive into the opportunities embedded within. And that presents opportunities for employment or for additional education after high school. And in several cases in our CTE programming, we use PLTW curriculum, and that stands for Project Lead the Way, several of which are accredited with the University of Colorado Springs for dual enrollment credits. In yellow, and it's kind of covered up there, hopefully you can see it on the screen, is our Innovative Learning Opportunity Program. And this enables high school students to recover any past learning loss that they may have, to obtain high school credit, to engage in the development of success skills, and then also experience work-based learning. They do so in a small group environment and through individualized scheduling and support. In green on the key is the online programming, and this is programming that students can engage in beginning in 7th grade through a vendor that we use called the Colorado Digital Learning Solutions, and they can do so either on a part-time or a full-time basis. Part-time is for students who take anywhere between 2 and 5 courses, and full-time is between 6 and 7. We are proud partners of that vendor that I mentioned earlier, Colorado Digital Learning Solutions, because not only are the courses aligned with Colorado academic content standards, but they are also taught by Colorado licensed teachers. And then last on the key in red, and only last because it's alphabetized, is the traditional high school setting. And so this is what we're probably most familiar with when we think about a high school experience for students. So these are our wonderful, highly qualified, capable, amazing teachers delivering content embedded into the school day in person and built into a student's schedule. So we know that the traditional high school experience really serves as the taproot of all of the other secondary programs that exist. So just with a brief overview of that, then if we return to the pathways that are up on the screen, you will see, as I mentioned earlier, the journey of 4 hypothetical high school students as they're walking their path towards graduation and beyond. And really what this was called out to exemplify was that students can and often do combine several programmings to fit their individual needs, and they can and do sometimes change their mind as they progress through the learning. So with that as a reminder, today the agenda that I'm hoping to walk us through is to look a little bit at some of the data collection that we've been gathering over the past 2 years since we last met. Some of the themes that have arisen from that, to talk about the individual career and academic planning process, to talk a little bit about our secondary online programming trends, college credit opportunities, and career and technical education, and reminding you that those last 3 bullets are part of the note catcher that was distributed by Casey just a second ago. So since 2021, which you guys all are very familiar with because we talked about it just in March, was a process that we underwent called trying to call out the postures and non-academic habits that graduates of Lewis Palmer School District 38 need to exemplify once they graduate. And so the portrait of a graduate is on the screen for a couple of reasons. One, because it really does feed in the sources of all of our secondary programs, but also because what we're really trying to call out is the immense amount of data collection that went into this process. If you remember back in March, we talked a lot about the conversations we had with students and staff and families and industry partners and you to collect that information to help us arrive at these postures. So we know that it's navigator, communicator, problem solver, contributor, and connector. Well, simultaneously, as we were collecting this data, which was over the course of about 18 months, we were also collecting data because we were the recipients of something called the School Counselor Core Grant. And so in the spring of 2022, we had collected some interest from our staff and from families that led us to the pursuit of a goal that is called the School Counselor Core Grant. And this grant allows us to employ a post-secondary counselor at each of our operated sites, so Lewis Palmer Middle School, Palmer Ridge High School, and Lewis Palmer High School, for the sole purpose of guiding students through their post-secondary ambitions and their conversations that they're having. So that work starts this year, and I'm happy to announce that we have Robin Hudson at Lewis Palmer High School, Emily Haluska at the middle school, and Angela Dawson at Palmer Ridge High School. And what you might be wondering right now is if we applied and received the grant in the spring of 22, what did we do last year? Well, the initial year of this grant is really to collect a lot of data to make sure that the work that we're going to be doing with this grant is needed. And so all of last year, we conducted a needs assessment with students. It was very similar and aligned well with our portrait of a graduate conversations, but we spoke to 2,000 students, 90 staff, and about 375 families to really gather from them what their perceptions are for our post-secondary planning and the conversations that we're having. We then had that data and moved into something called an environmental scan, where we reviewed several factors, some of which was our census data, some of which was our matriculation rates. We looked at the National Clearinghouse information, and then towards the end, we began to really synthesize this information through a SWOT analysis or a cause analysis. And what we arrived at is on the screen in front of you now, which will serve as our goals for this grant. So our plan is to reinvigorate the individual career and academic planning. Previously, that was done from 9th through 12th grade. We're extending it down into 7th grade beginning this year, and we're using a tool called U-Science, which I'll talk about in just a moment. We seek to enhance pathway option expansion and awareness. So we did hear from several of our constituents that there was an emphasis to expand those. Some examples are the military and more emphasis on the trades. And then also we seek to increase post-secondary promotional events. So bringing back college fairs, career fairs, and CTE showcases. So we will be engaging in that work this year and moving into the future. The first of which that I mentioned was the individual career and academic planning. And this is a process really that is required by the state, but one that we're really excited about reinvigorating this year. So what you'll see in the image to the left is the trajectory of which we'd like for our students to experience as they march from 7th grade all the way through 12th grade, as far as beginning with some self-discovery about what their aptitudes and their interests are, and then taking those and putting them into practice as they engage into the high school years. And I mentioned earlier a tool that we're using called U-Science, and this really stands for like the science of you. That's where the name comes from. And it's interesting because it's very different than any other platform that we've looked at or that we've previously used, because typically those former platforms really just collect student interests, and U-Science also collects their aptitudes. So students will engage in activities and a battery of assessments where they not only are answering questions about whether or not they'd rather build a cupboard or read a book, they're actually also doing exercises that extract their aptitudes. And at the very end, the most exciting thing is that it actually produces for them career paths that tap into those aptitudes that were their strengths, and then also their interests, and then it even overlays them. It goes in further and it starts to discuss what those career paths are, what the salaries are, what the demand will be, where in the nation you can find these positions, what kind of education is needed. I mean, it just provides a lot of information for students. And then we'll also provide a lot of information for us as we start to build and customize experiences for students as they move forward. So it helps us to customize and really help develop some online or some academic planning for them. And in some cases, that academic planning already has and will continue to expose a need for online programming. So I mentioned earlier that our online program uses an online vendor, Colorado Digital Learning Solutions, and that we have been in operation since about 2017, which you can imagine how COVID really helped us refine our processes here. But here are just some quick statistics about what is going on with our online program. So in the fall semester, we enroll about 134 students. That always increases slightly into the spring semester. On average, those 134 students usually take about 455 courses. We have an amazing online mentor. Her name is Miss Ellie Kagerais, and she helps students not only get enrolled, but also helps them with their technical issues that they may have as they're engaging in their online learning. Our proportion of part-time versus full-time students. So we have about 74% of our students are part-time, and just reminding you that part-time is between 2 and 5 online courses, and then full-time is 6 and above. And that number we perceive will be growing soon, and I'll talk about that in the next slide.
Every year, we have about 49% of our online population is new, and then there's about 51% that are returning. So students do continue to come back to online learning as they've experienced it. And then we have about half and half versus our course selection and then our online course selection. And then last is just the proportion of students that come into the online program. So we usually have about 10% of our online program is from the middle school, 40% is from Lewis Palmer High School, and 50% is from Palmer Ridge High School. So these statistics have remained pretty constant, as you can see, from 2021 until about now. But what's been changing and something that's been pretty captivating to us is what's on the next slide, and these are the enrollment trends. So every time a student decides to enroll in the online program, we do ask them why they're interested in enrolling in the online program. And what you can see in the dark blue and the light blue, kind of towards the bottom of the graphs, is the flexibility. So there's just a high pursuit for flexibility with our online programming, versus whether it be modality, environment, or scheduling. And then right above that in orange is health. So it's probably no surprise to us that in the 21-22 school year, there was a large percentage of students that were wanting to continue online learning for health concerns. We're still walking out of the pandemic at that point. And what's interesting to us as we start to look at the years and these trends is we start to notice that health is getting a little bit smaller, and what's growing are the categories above that. So competing obligations, that is really students who either have a job or they're in an internship or they have a hobby that is, or a passion that they're working on. It could be within their church or their place of worship, or they could be athletes. We are now starting to see an insurgence of competitive athletes performing at really high levels that are wanting to do the online program. Course selection is in purple. We do have responses, and you can see that that's growing as well, from families and students that are saying, well, we want to take this course and it's not offered in the course book of our high school. And then the last one is advantage. This one's interesting to me because some families and students have expressed an interest in joining the online program simply because they perceive that they will be taking online courses in their future. And they want to understand it now. They want to experience it while they're still in high school. So that was really interesting to us as we were watching the trends roll out. And this is why I spoke earlier to the fact that I do perceive that full-time online enrollments will likely grow because of the shift that we see in the online trends. So in addition to looking at that individual career and academic plan and finding advantage in taking some online courses, there are also college credit opportunities that we are starting to see grow within our environment as well. So what you see on the screen in front of you now is a large Venn diagram, and in the center of that Venn diagram is really a black triangle with a yellow star in it, and that means that college credit can be attained in any one of these areas. And these are areas that we've been using in the past and some that we're developing as we move forward. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with this salmon colored circle that says concurrent enrollment on it. So concurrent enrollments, these are courses, I mentioned them just a little bit earlier, where students typically go and they take the class at the institution of higher education and they engage with their professor at that place. So they set up their schedule. They could take a class in the evening or on the weekends, or maybe even during the day if their schedule allows for them to do so, but they do take it at that campus. And then if we move counterclockwise, we're looking at Campus Pathways Adjunct. So these are courses, the same college course, but they're taught in our school buildings. And we are able to secure college professors to come into our buildings to teach these courses. And we do so when we have a high interest in a certain course. So currently we have adjunct professors coming from Pikes Peak State College in the area of American Sign Language, both at Lewis Palmer High School and Palmer Ridge High School. And then we have an English 121, which is essentially just English Comp 1 happening at Lewis Palmer High School. So these, again, are college professors that are coming into our environment to help teach these classes. Counterclockwise, again, we're now in like the 12 o'clock position. You'll see Campus Pathways FTE. So this is the same model where we have a college instructor teaching our students in our environment, but these are instructors that are actually already on our staff. So our own teachers then have a section of college that they teach in their schedule. I'm going to go one more time to now dual enrollment, which is counterclockwise again. And these are a little bit different in the sense that these are high school courses. So the concurrent enrollment and campus pathways options that I mentioned earlier,
These students have already enrolled in the institution of higher education and they've qualified for that class, and they are all college students at this point. Dual enrollment is different because this is a high school class that has been verified by the college, and certain students in that class may elect to go ahead and pay a little bit of extra money to get it on a college transcript. So the similarity between all four of those that I've shared so far is that the instructor needs to be highly qualified as governed by the Higher Learning Commission. And what that means is they need to have either a master's degree in the content area or a master's degree plus 18 graduate hours in the content area. So those are some of the college offerings that we have there. If you move down, we're going counterclockwise, we're almost done, and we're in the purple now, and this is advanced placement. I mentioned earlier what this is. Again, this is governed by the College Board, and these are college level classes that are taught in our schools by a qualified teacher, and at the very end of the course, then they are able to take an advanced placement exam, and should they receive a certain qualifying score, then an institution of higher education will accept that and put it onto their college transcript. And then the last one, kind of the 6 o'clock position, is CLEP. And this is one that we're really excited about and that we're exploring. So CLEP stands for College Level Examination Program. And this is, I'm not sure if anyone in here has ever taken the CLEP exam before, but it has been around for a while, and it also is governed by the College Board. This is an opportunity where students who feel that they have a certain amount of knowledge and a skill can come in and they can take the CLEP exam. Dr. Michael Brahm is a visionary, and he started this just a couple of years ago, and he has made our school district a CLEP site, and Big Red is a CLEP site, and myself, Mari Campbell, and he are all proctors of the CLEP exam. I mentioned earlier that students can take the CLEP exam should they feel that they are prepared to do so. If they aren't feeling like they're prepared to do so, there's also a curriculum that they can walk through that's free and allows them to take the CLEP exam for free. There are currently 34 CLEP exams. And again, as I mentioned before, we're really walking through how that looks in our school district. So I'll talk, CLEP comes up again here in just a moment, but I'm moving on to the next slide. And these are just some of the trends that we've seen with college credit attainment. So I mentioned before, if you'll see the first column is concurrent enrollment. These are credits. So we have 15 credits that were obtained in the 17-18 school year. You'll see campus pathways we've spoken about. Ascent is a 5th year of high school, and it is really for concurrent enrollment. So it stands for accelerating students through concurrent enrollment. And so we have been offering Ascent as well. And then Career Start. As I mentioned on the very first screen, it was one of the colors associated with those boots. And this is that opportunity where students do select a program, 1 to 15, and they are juniors or seniors, and they become students of the college. And that allows them to then be transported every single day to go engage in the learning that awaits for them at the institution of higher education, which right now is primarily Pikes Peak State College, but we also have a partnership with the International Salon and Spa Academy. So you will see kind of in that total column through those 4 pathways, those 4 college credit attainment opportunities, we've secured lots and lots of credits for students each and every year through those programs. So what you'll see, if you were to look at the 23-24 school year, and the total up there is 1,957. Again, that's credits, right? That's not students, but I would say that that represents about 250 students. And what has been really interesting to us as we explore this is how it creates somewhat of a different narrative than what we're typically used to seeing when we receive our matriculation rates from the state. And what I mean by that is if you look at the next slide, what you'll see on the left is similar to what the Colorado Department of Education releases as our matriculation rates. And you'll see that it says 5.8% towards military, 6% towards CTE, 48.1% towards 4-year institutions, and then 14% towards 2-year institutions. The vulnerability in that report is that this only counts when for students who have graduated and then enroll in college. What that number and that metric does not account for is students who have already enrolled in college. And as what you saw from the previous screen, We have several of those. And so we're reshaping our narrative and how we're thinking about our matriculation rates just a little bit. And so on the picture on the right, military remains the same, but we really have grouped together the post-secondary enrollment. So we have grouped together the 2-year and the 4-year and the CTE simply because those are all post-secondary institutions that are all viable and leading towards a great career and future. But what you'll see in purple is something, again, that the state does not report on. And these are students who have already been enrolled in institutions of higher education. So, so when you add that metric in, it tells a little bit of a more accurate story and a narrative that we'd like to continue having. So moving forward, I promised I would come back to some of those college credit opportunities. And so to start up at the top, I mentioned earlier dual enrollment. We do have dual enrollment courses. A lot of the dual enrollment courses that we offer are through Project Lead the Way. That was one of those very early acronyms that I listed. Those are our engineering classes and our biomedical science classes. We also offer Calc 3 differential equations and physics through dual enrollment. So again, those are high school classes where students at the very end are able to complete some paperwork and have that grade transcribed onto a college transcript. We have administered over 50 CLEP exams since the spring of 2021, equating to about 135 credits, and it saved approximately $65,000 for families who have whose students have partaken in that. Again, to go back to Dr. Braun, he actually led the charge last year in allowing or permitting our pre-calculus class at one of our high schools to use the CLEP exam as a final. And so the students proceeded through pre-calculus. And then when they took the CLEP exam, 19 out of 21 of them passed the test. And the 2 that didn't missed it by 1 point. And the best news for those 2 students is they get to take it again, right? There's no limit as to how many times they take it. So we're really excited about the implications and how that can look moving forward. We have 20 AP courses available to both of our operated high schools. And then through those 20 courses, we administered last year 1,101 AP tests to a total of 606 students with a pass rate of about 79%. Okay, moving forward. The last topic that we're really going to talk about is career and technical education. And career and technical education is what we all experienced likely when we were in high school. It's the old vocational education. So it's if you were in shop or if you were in metals or if you were in home economics, the federal and state government has really expanded the definition of vocational education and transferred it into something called career and technical education. And so it really serves to align with various industry needs in local economic regional areas. So my job, I am considered the CTE director for our school district, and I get to engage in a process called the a needs assessment, a local comprehensive needs assessment with area school districts to really look at our regional economy and then to speak to industry leaders and then to convert what we know about our economy into programs that can serve students as they are in our secondary schools, either middle school or high school. So what we have done is we not only learned that the prominent economic clusters in our area are business, marketing, public administration, engineering, skilled trades, and then health sciences and career or criminal justice. But we've also then gone and developed programs that look very similar to what you see on the screen in front of you now. So we have a business and marketing program at both Lewis Palmer High School and Palmer Ridge High School. We have biomedical sciences happening at Lewis Palmer Middle School and Lewis Palmer High School. Skilled trades and construction is at all 3 sites. We have digital media and communications at all 3 sites, and then engineering and IT are happening in both of our operated high schools. So moving into the next slide, here are some more trends that you will see. We also track the enrollment numbers that we get from students, but also the gender breakdown. That is a federal metric that they collect from us as far as making sure that we are providing opportunities for and access for all students. What it might look like on the screen is that there was a large decline between 2021 and 2022 in the area of engineering. And I just want to call out that that is not necessarily a decline in enrollment there, but rather prior to the 21-22 school year, we were only able to count our middle school students in the engineering pathway. And beginning in 21-22, we were able to actually place them where they belong as far as their programming is concerned along that continuum. So you'll notice the number of students right below this, the school year in the upper left-hand corner, and you'll see an increase each and every year for our CTE programming. So one of the various aspects I mentioned earlier that it's really important for CTE programming to align with industry. We have regular advisory committees with our industry to speak into what we're doing. And should they have any kind of recommendations for us, then we become eligible for some additional funding of which to continue to enhance our programming. One metric that we've become quite excited about is the idea of administering industry certifications to our students who are in these programs. And so beginning in about the 2021 school year, we started paying really close attention to something called the Career Development and Incentive Program, where the Colorado Workforce and Development Market has put together some industry certifications that are important in various industries, and then actually administering them in our CTE programs. So you will see Fusion 360 is an industry certification that we administered in our engineering programs. Adobe Photoshop and Adobe InDesign we have administered in our digital media and communications pathways. And then Pact Core Construction Technology, we've administered those in our skilled trades pathways. This coming year, we're hoping to include a small business and entrepreneurship industry credential for our business programs, and then also Python for our information technology program. So not only is it a great opportunity for students to add an industry certification onto a resume, and it can really help them to qualify for their next career or for their college entrance. But we also, as I mentioned earlier, participate in something called the Career Development and Incentive Program. And that allows us to also secure some monies back from the state to help pay for these credentials and help prop up some of our programming as well. I mentioned some of the CTE partnerships that we have. So beyond the programs that we offer in our school district, I had said that Career Start has some programs, and then also the International Salon and Spa Academy. This is just a table that shows you the different programming that our students access when they travel down to Pikes Peak State College for Career Start. They also are able to receive industry credentials through this programming, and they engage in the learning in labs and with industry partners and in classroom settings as well. So regardless of whether or not our CTE programming is happening in our coordinated schools or at one of our partnerships, one metric that we also pay close attention to is work-based learning. So because CTE, career and technical education, is tightly aligned with industry needs, we are really interested in creating work-based learning opportunities for our students. And so here are some trends that you'll see from 2019-2020. There are really 3 ways that our students engage in work-based learning at the high school level. And one of them is called industry-sponsored project. An industry-sponsored project is when a business or a company comes into our classrooms and collaboratively partners with them, and they work on a project together. So an example of this would be just a couple of years ago, Kinship Landing is a lodging facility down in Colorado Springs, and they partnered with Nate Stricker in the development of their outdoor furniture. A supervised entrepreneurship experience is when our schools and our classrooms actually have they're running a business. So an example of this would be in our business program at Palmer Ridge High School. MoCo Apparel has been creating apparel and merchandise through their supervised entrepreneurship experience. And then the last one is internship. So I think we're familiar with that is when students are actually engaging in the place of employment with the employer and learning the skills that go along with that particular occupation. You'll see on the screen now, those 20, that we did have 25 completed internships last year in the 22-23 school year, and they were distributed among these companies that you see on the screen in front of you. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, we are the 3 areas of work-based learning that we really focus on with our students, being the supervised entrepreneurial experience, the school-based enterprise, and then internships. Those align with something called Colorado's work-based learning continuum, which is put together by Talent Found. And you'll see them in that middle column on the screen on the image kind of towards the left. And that's really learning through work. So we are celebrating the opportunity that students have the chance to learn about work kind of in the earlier ages by going on field trips and having guest speakers. And we move towards the learning through work. A couple of pieces of information became apparent to us when we conducted the needs assessment and the environmental scan with the school counselor program that I spoke of earlier. And that was really that it calls attention to the fact that if you think about the graph that I showed with the trends of the work-based learning, the highest lines are going to be with the supervised entrepreneurship experience and the industry sponsored project. And the lowest of the lines and the slowest trending is that of internships. And so these 2 data points that you see on the right really helped us to understand why that might be the case. One of them being from the census, that 17.6% of our workers in the Tri-Lakes area work from home. And of those who do go to work, they commute an average of 33.9 minutes to work. So this basically, I mean, this sheds light on the fact that the Tri-Lakes area is very much a commuter community and brings some attention to the difficulty that we will have in securing internships for our students. And so all this lines up with the next idea that kind of began to spark in my mind, just a little bit of a catalyst of knowing the difficulty that our students and we will have in getting our students into work-based learning experiences with the data that I just shared with you. The idea started to percolate about what if we were to create a situation in our school district where students actually experience work-based learning from a centralized location. So I've been in CTE now for 4 years, and I know the magical things happen when our CTE programs really start to collaborate with one another. And so the idea really was if we had centralized locations where students in CTE programming and special populations, and I'll talk about that in a moment, were to put together a business plan where they would offer a menu of goods and services, right? So goods, of course, being specialty items that can be personalized and displayed on any matter of material. So clothing or hats or wood or soft metals or glass. And then also services being graphic design and printing. And so if you look around a lot of our school district buildings, what you'll see is all sorts of items and signs that have been printed that we outsource to other companies. So what you can probably imagine in thinking about this is that to secure the equipment in order to do this. I mean, if we're thinking about apparel, t-shirt presses and hat presses, I mentioned earlier, carving on wood, engraving. So we have laser engravers, 3D printers, graphic design needs some really nice computers, and then printing, just really state-of-the-art printers. There's quite a cost that comes with that. Well, last spring, I had become quite acquainted with a grant opportunity called the Innovations in CTE Grant. And so I wrote for it for this purpose, and we were selected to receive it. And so we're very excited about that. What you'll see on the screen now is the how, right? This D38 enterprise, that's what we're calling it. So thinking back to the school-based enterprise that I talked about with MoCo, really trying to expand that concept, again, in a student-led enterprise that can exist. So the distribution of funds that we had asked for, you'll see on the left, the lighter green is the digital media communications. It's astounding how expensive those printers are. We hope to get so good to where we're printing the D38 dispatch at some point with those. You'll also see the business, there's red, and that's for business. That again goes towards some of the equipment for the t-shirts and for the hat press. What I didn't mention earlier was construction, and that's because embedded in this idea of creating work-based learning opportunities for our students, we are breaking ground really soon on a home build for students to participate at the Lewis Palmer High School site. So all in, you can imagine the amount of research that was needed and talking to industry partners. And then also now we're in the phase of trying to secure some of the equipment that we've been approved to purchase. So who is going to be running this? So I mentioned earlier, and if you had the chance to meet me and have conversations with me, you know how student focused I want this to be. So this will be a student run on enterprise for them. And so if you think about our CTE pathways, what you'll see kind of are some examples on the left. Each pathway has a progression of learning where students will start with some basic information, and as they progress through the semesters and through the school year, they actually end up at a pretty deep level of understanding in each of our pathways. And so in the construction example, that's WBL, standing for work-based learning. And then in the business one, which is in red, that's capstone. So those students kind of at the higher levels of learning, both in the work-based learning and capstone area, will be the ones running the business. And then we're also going to bring in some of our special populations. So individuals with disabilities, those that come from economically disadvantaged families. That's a population that we'd like to involve in this as well. And you're probably wondering where this is going to take place. Well, we have been granted permission to utilize what was formerly the Palmer Lake Early Childhood Center. For some of this, we're also going to be operating out of our partnership with Monumental Impact. That's where the engineering equipment will reside. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a home build that's happening at Lewis Palmer High School. So 3 separate sites for this enterprise to exist in. And lastly, the win. So this is about an 18-month timeline that I'm operating off of right now. That includes soliciting committee members, getting lots of great ideas and perspectives from all sorts of people, because eventually this enterprise will run during the school day. And so that takes a lot of specificities around transportation and staffing and student scheduling and nutrition services. There's just a lot of coordination. So really getting a lot of voices in the room for that. Preparing the initial space modifications and securing some of the equipment. And then also designing a work-based learning experience myself. So I'd like to bring on some interns to help with the business plan, with the online storefronts, and then moving forward to hopefully have a soft launch of this in the 4th quarter, school quarter of this year. So right after spring break, and then go into operation next year with our primary customers being our district entities. And then who knows, into the future, maybe we will expand into our community. So that's just a broad timeline. And I think that leads me to the place where we can share out. So the notes that you've taken, we are open to any kind of questions or celebrations or aspirations that you have.
Mr. Norris?
Good, fantastic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Still?
I have all sorts of notes. I don't start with you all of them, but I think that I'll just acknowledge, I think the club program is a large one to celebrate, and there's numerous acknowledgements and celebrations, but that one stood out significantly to me.
I just want to give a quick shout out to both Ms. McAllister and Dr. Braun on that initiative. We're not aware of any other school district currently using this strategy. And so this is truly an innovation that we're deploying that sets us apart from other districts.
Sure, and in terms of, you know, every student, every day, empowering those students. That's only good comes of that. So that's wonderful. How do you envision, so if you can just go back to, I'm thinking of just a summary, the D38 enterprise who, with how do you ultimately envision, I'm thinking of D38, the student community as a whole. How would you envision, you know, the work-based CTE tracks students also continuing to interact through their years in D38 with the academic track students? My pause is that you could end up with sort of 2 main roads of students who might not necessarily interact, and you could potentially lose you know, the student body or all, you know, D38 district community connections, some of them at a point. So I'm just wondering if that's been part of the conversation or, and it could just be a wonder. It doesn't have to be a question you answer right now.
So right now, as you probably saw from the timeline, we are now in the place of gathering that kind of information and that perspective, because what we also know as far as the innovative aspect of CLEP, this is also innovative. There's really no model for us to go off of. And so we continue to have just great conversations and learn about any kind of blind spots we may have. So that's something that I'll certainly make a note of, and
yeah, I think
really consider it up.
One place to maybe gather some additional information is some of the university settings that are doing this in really wonderful ways, commingling, you know, integrated, not just integrated majors, but integrated learning tracks, so that those students continue to learn from each other. That would be the ultimate goal.
Right. And so that's part of the idea, Teresa, is, you know, if we have a client that comes to us and wants a certain design, well, that's where the graphic design person will work with the business person, will then work with the engineer to facilitate, you know, the creation of that product.
Sure.
So I hear what you're saying, and that's going to be an important aspect of it for sure.
And then the only other main theme, I have lots of other little things, is you talked about 3 locations right now. Are you anticipating? I know that, and I'm of course thinking, I'm toggling between university settings and here, but are you envisioning like a makerspace eventually, or a centralized location?
I mean, that would be,
or have you considered that?
That would be a dream for me.
I just know, and this harkens back to 2 hours ago, but some of the original work around around the old Grace Best building a number of years ago was people wanting a flexible space in the community that would be used by D38 students, staff, families, and community members but I know that's a lot, but just something to maybe throw into the mix in terms of thinking, because I know you're early in, but wonderful work, and I really appreciate the readout on the core council grant too. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I got to check off several of mine. Thank you, Teresa. Mr. Schwartz.
Okay, lots to unpack here. So I'd like to start with asking my teammates to join me in standing up, please.
Oh, standing up.
Standing up, and I can see you all, even you, Chris. Let's give this team a standing ovation. This is awesome work. And it felt good to get up, didn't it? I can tell Dr. Summer's staff is envious. You guys can do that later.
If we
So a couple of really important things, and Teresa, thank you for a couple important things here just to summarize. Teresa, thank you for starting to connect these dots, because it's so important, right? We have to make sure that we as a team behave comprehensively and not in compact packets. So the discussion that we had earlier today and the complexity around things like HH and educational funding all boil down to what we do with the few dollars we have. And this is a great example of taking the macroeconomic things that are happening around us and being proactive and creating an environment where every kid in our school system becomes an adult and becomes a quality contributor to our community, because they have options and choices. And just to give you an example of what's happening around us, so there's a pretty credible organization called the National Center for Education Data Statistics. And in the last decade plus, the number of graduates moving on to higher education is down 14.6%. Our particular district, not nearly that dramatic because of the nature of our demographics, but still down just in the last 5 years, about a little over 3%. So our capacity to provide other options for them to become valued contributors to the community they choose to be in is huge. And our capacity now to connect the dots of what Mr. Ridgway and Ms. Phillips just brought up in terms of Are we really utilizing all of our assets to benefit our constituents and our student customers? Really comes to roost with exactly this presentation. So Amber, Jess, Dr. Brahm, and balance of the team, terrific job in helping us build something comprehensive that allows our community to continue to be successful and have an impact on our country. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Very well said. Is Mr. Clausen still with us? Don't see him. I want to echo what was just said. I had a lot of great questions, a great presentation. What the thing that comes out is how we as D38 are doing more with less. How we are trying to make sure that we are being innovative, that we have multiple pathways and avenues that fits the needs of each individual student and family. And how we really are, putting our students first with those dollars and ensuring that the limited dollars that we do have are as close to the student as they can be. So I want to celebrate that. I did have a question. I'm glad that was answered. If a local business owner wants to engage in this process of this project in helping our students grow, if they want to donate a 3D printer, or they have an automotive program that they'd like to engage students in for mentorship, how would they engage, or how would they go about that? And is there an opportunity for that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there are a couple of ways. I mentioned earlier that CTE is really focused on aligning with industry partners. And so we do have quite a few industry partners that come to our advisory meetings. But to your example earlier about automotive, we don't have an advisory program, so we wouldn't have we don't have an auto program, so we wouldn't have an advisory member. They would just reach out to me. Students are also quite savvy at finding opportunities and then connecting with me to make it official so that they're able to get both high school elective credit, and then a grade with that experience. So they can either reach out directly to me, they can reach out to those post-secondary counselors that I mentioned earlier. I do have a work-based learning presence on the website, and there's a contact us there. So if there are any other ideas of how we can reach them, that would be, we'd welcome it for sure. But those are the mechanisms we're doing so right now.
Because what comes to mind is to Mr. Schwartz's point and to Teresa's point and to Brett's point, these are our kids. These are our D38 students and our families and our community. And any way that we can, as a community, come together and honor and celebrate and help our education system and our students to succeed, it gives us as community members a sense of ownership and pride in who we are in D38 and the students that are products of who we are as D38 school system. So in my mind, any opportunity where community members and family members can get involved and engage is another positive step. And to families, how do we ensure that you had mentioned early on when we were collecting data and looking at how students, what's the best pathways for students? How are we ensuring that we're honoring students and families that want to blaze their own trail, and that perhaps maybe an assessment test comes out and shows this is a good path for you, but maybe that's not in the soul or in the fabric of who that student feels they want to go down? Do we have a way to ensure that those students can still blaze their own path in a different direction if they want?
Yeah, most certainly. So we will try and get the information that we can from those assessments, but to your point, they're not locked into that, right? We do encourage, and oftentimes they'll change their minds as well, right? We'll put them in what they think is their pathway, and then they have an experience and they've decided to change their mind. We honor that as well. So any kind of deviation from any pathway or changing their mind away from the pathway. We had a student who was convinced they wanted to be a dental hygienist until they went and shadowed and they saw blood and they said, I am not doing that. So that's progress, right? They made a decision against. So absolutely.
I have a kiddo that blazes on a trail. Good. And I was doing well. And then my last question is on the slide, on the matriculation rates. Do we have data that we could put together at a later date to show over a certain time period what our matriculation calculation has been in D38? Where things have gone up and down?
Yes, we can include that in our upcoming assessment results overview.
Perfect.
Well, while we're on that slide, or I am.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does that 10% belong in the 68.1%, or is it completely separate?
So that's a good point. One thing I do want to point out with this data as well is that while we're indicating military enlistment, that also includes 4-year military academy enrollment. And so there's a lot of nuances with this data that we can unpack.
Sure.
So yes, post-secondary enrollment that's happening during high school, and that 10% is post-secondary enrollment as well. That makes sense. We're just kind of parting it out to what happens in high school versus what happens after high school.
But correct me if I'm wrong, because I think this is the exact issue. CDE doesn't allow us to double count a student.
On the state performance frame.
So what you see on the left-hand side is a CDE calculation. What you see on the right-hand side is our own local accounting of the 10% that are not counted in the CDE calculation.
Which I think is great in terms of informing our constituents and our families and our students. I'd actually like to see that broken out even more with more detail, like Amber's speaking to with military or with post-secondary. I mean, not to make it more detailed, but we have students doing innovative and different things, and in whatever capacity D38 can represent that, I think it will just add to the robustness of what we are, how we are communicating what we are providing K through 12. So
We need a local measure that allows us to do that without depending completely on the external.
And I think part of that is what Jess communicated in some of the slides that break down how many students are taking advantage of these different options.
yeah,
But you're saying, I'm hearing you say to continue to think about how to project that visually as we're
sure, just brainstorming session from a number of people. But yeah.
Well, and the other thing, and this is exactly why we wanted to have a conversation about this type of data, is how do we account for every student's future pathway in some meaningful and measurable way? Because even the white sort of like makes it look like, well, then there's
some others.
another, which is not to diminish at all what different options and choices kids have.
No, it's a work in progress and a lot of great work in progress.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Thank you so much for putting this together. And we can, if anybody else has any questions that we didn't get answered, we can reach out and
Please,
email. Yeah.
That'd be your
I
You want
was
our
on
sheets?
ROT, no, you can't have my sheet. I got so many questions and stuff.
We did not intend to have you turn those in,
Yes, chicken
but
scratch.
we did want to keep the conversations more than even conversations.
This
just
is
the-
excellent conversation.
The efforts visible and understandable and again, just kudos to a lot of continuous evolution.
And it goes into, again, what you all as staff members discussed on Friday that, and I talked to Dr. Summers about this. We so often when we're having our discussions about focusing on our students, we focus on what are we faced with in the here and now? What's going on in D38 this week? Or what do we need to tackle here? This is visionary in that we're looking, when we ask, what does a D38 student look like in 15 years? And we think of the class of 2036.
2036.
2036. sorry. Woo.
Although 3036 is another, it's a whole nother conversation.
Class of 2026, that's our incoming kindergartners, right? So when you think back of the 13 years where we were in D38 13 years ago, what is D38 going to look like in 13 years, and what are those students going to be faced with? And so again, this is visionary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we started 10 minutes late, so we are now 15 minutes late. We still have three more items on the agenda. So what do we want to do, board? With we have policy review and revision, and we have student representative of our board meetings, and then a review of our draft for September's meeting. You want to dedicate 10 minutes to each item? Or do you want
Are
to
all of
table?
these policies being reviewed and voted on at our next board meeting?
So I can do a best effort toward summarizing that there. So the current revisions that were brought forward at the August regular meeting, including ICICA, IHBIB, well, those two are just a reminder that those revisions nothing's happened to those between last meeting and where you're going into September. KC, excuse me. KEC-R, KEC-E have some modifications that are being revised. Are those the active ones that are in there?
The changes are not yet in what you see in Word docs, but they will be for the next regular meeting.
And to make a quick jump, we will have those ready, I can say by early next week, when we finalize the agenda for the September 18th meeting. We'll make sure to call your attention to those additional revisions, because those three will be reviewed and considered for approval as part of a second reading at the September 18th meeting.
So as you're working through the changes to it based on feedback that's not reflected here, but
Not yet.
okay.
But
And if there's any other conversation you want to have with you,
Yes,
okay.
just let us know. We will, what I was really wanting to make sure you knew is we will have that updated revision for KEC specifically by early next week. And we'll let you know exactly when that's ready to go. And then it will be shared with the whole community for any other potential comment at that September 18th meeting. The only new policy that has a first reading attached to it for September is GDD, and that is built into the agenda. And that is around support staff vacations and holidays. It's actually a very straightforward revision. So that would be presented at the, again, the September meeting for a first reading with the second reading follow.
all right. Any quick questions? No? Mr. Schwartz, do you have any quick questions?
None, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for calling that out, calling attention to that. Well, then if we have 5 minutes, Dr. Summers, do you want to go over student representatives real quick?
We want to support whatever you all want to talk about. So I'm gonna pass the
Okay.
the buck back there.
What this is in regards to is, we have had a vision of including our students, having student representatives at our board meetings. What does that look like? What are the logistics that we as a board envision that? Would it be at work sessions, or would it be at regular board meetings? To what extent would their engagement and input be in those meetings? So that's what the discussion is, to get a consensus. We'd like to get this launched sooner than later. This is a great idea, and yet another way to ensure that our students are engaged students.
Personally, I think the meetings are open to anybody and everyone in the community, including students at any time. And I think having regular student representation could only augment our meetings. So I don't know. I know there's different ideas about what students, to include formally, but I don't have personally any objection. Students.
Mr. Norris?
Draft a policy.
What would that policy look like?
kind of governing the support there. Do we need to? I don't know.
So, still, in terms of needing a policy to govern that, I don't think it would necessarily, I think it's more maybe just guidelines that you all are developing. I know, Ron, are you still with us?
I'm still with us.
Do you want to speak to what you've all, because you had some
Sure.
initial lines of communication, I think, into both of the high schools at least. So do you
Yeah.
want to start there?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I'll take full accountability for any confusion on this. Last spring, we came up with this idea, socialized it across the board, and the goal now is to operationalize it. The concept's really simple. Is there are a lot of students, there's a cohort of students out there, especially at the high school level, that have volunteered themselves for student government. They're interested and they're engaged. They really have passion around how things work and trying to make them better if they can have an impact. We thought it might make a ton of sense and would be wonderful to include one or two of them at our formal board meetings and have at least one board member sponsor them, which means having them sit next to that board member so they can understand the interactions and the goings on and see if they want to continue forward in government and or take some of the best practices that we do into their school. And that was the concept. And so I reached out to both principals who said, terrific, let's do this. When and where do we begin? That's how we got to here. So we probably do need some guidelines in order to make this work right, but it's really an opportunity and a privilege for us to engage our customers in what we do and for them to engage in what's happening administratively only above them. What I envision is one of us sponsoring a high school kid at each board meeting, having them sit next to one of us, having us answer any questions on the side that they have, and at the end, giving them an opportunity to make any comments.
So Ron, is your vision to have a different student at each meeting then?
Yes.
I think it's a great starting point. I would advocate for, and I think it's a logical starting point to start with the administrators and the student council, but I would also advocate for additional students being allowed, maybe in some sort of application process or something. We have students who are, hybrid students who have commitments at the local community colleges and whatnot, who may be choosing not to be in the student government there because they're not full-time at the sites. So, or may have, be doing online mostly because they are a professional or have, they're headed into music or athletics. So I just wouldn't want there to be any aspect of excluding a student because they're not in a formalized student council position.
Yeah, it'd be a great problem to have more applicants than we need, right?
But I think there's pros and cons to having different students sponsored by different board members throughout the year versus having some consistency in a student from each building, being able to go back with feedback to their building and learning the process. I mean, as each of us board members know, one board meeting is it's like drinking from a fire hose, but if you get that and learn that consistency, and you have that cadence, then it's smoother, it flows faster.
It could be a point of experiential learning for students too, if they're in, say, a semester at a time, or a number of meetings or something, that then they could have the experience of being a liaison of sorts between a board meeting and the school, if you wanted to put that into practice. I don't know. But that would also be us dictating a lot of what needs to occur, when maybe the ultimate goal is for students to experience if they want to be here. So
Yeah, I would caution us not to overthink it.
yeah,
This is about exposure
Right. Yeah.
and giving them the exposure And then maybe us giving them an opportunity as an honor to make any comments if they choose or not. But this is just about us engaging deeper with our customers and making and getting them the proper level of exposure.
I think the exposure is important. I just want to make sure that we have some consistency with how it's executed and how
Mhm.
we are engaging. I think having that makes it fluid and smooth, versus how it's speaking right now.
Maybe we follow Mr. Norris's suggestion and draft up a very simple 4 or 5 bullet set of guidelines.
I think that would be great. I mean, because when I thought about this, another idea I thought of was if we did it as a work session. One of the things we talked about as also last spring was moving our work sessions to different sites. So that we're more accessible at our site to our parents and our staff. Obviously, we couldn't do that during the day. But if we changed our work sessions to after school, for example, when school gets out, where the students are, they can do it as an after school project at our site. So that's another vision that maybe it's doing 2 things at the same time, or maybe it's not. But I think drafting and outlining some ideas and then bringing it back. I know that postpones us for a month to do this. I would absolutely welcome and invite students to come to our board meeting and sit in and watch how we operate, and then we can go from there and where they sit at the table with us. Does that sound?
I think
It does.
it's board member drafting something
Yes.
to start with, so.
Mr. Schwartz, would you like to take that on?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Dr. Summers if he wouldn't mind doing it, since he's probably got it's closest to it. And I'll be happy to review it with you if that's okay.
I would be happy to work with you in that effort, Mr. Schwartz.
Thank you. I do have one suggestion in the spirit of not kicking the can down the road. We're going to wait another month since we only have 8 or 9 of these during the school year. Let's have 2 kids come in October. Every month we wait, there's 1 less kid that gets to have this experience.
I'd be happy to work to support that as well.
Thank you.
I would like it to be communicated with other board members as well first. It's not just one, it's all of us.
Communicate, so just.
Making sure that we're sending out what you draft up.
Okay, I can have that to you within probably, I wasn't gonna say 20 minutes, maybe a 20-hour window. We get you some guidelines. Am I hearing to your point, Mrs. Upchurch, there's consensus on supporting with the right guidelines, students being here at our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much for stepping forward and doing that. Appreciate making that live. Okay. And with that, I think you've all had a chance to review the draft for our September 18th meeting. Anything you need to add or? No, we saw this. Yeah. No, we're all good there. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Mr. Norris? Ms. Phillips? Mr. Schwartz?
Anything else? Thank you.
I don't either. Dr. Summers?
Have a great rest of your day.
All right, we are adjourned.
Yay.
Thank you. Good job bringing it back to closure.
Thank you so much, Mr. Schwartz. All right.